Fine.
All right,
Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you. I believe we're live now. And everyone, welcome to the Wednesday, September 23rd Planning Commission virtual public meeting being held via webinar. Hopefully the public is able to attend en masse and watch this on YouTube. We're also being broadcast on YouTube simultaneously. And the recording on YouTube will be posted for the future, so you can also reference this meeting after it is done. So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Wednesday, September 23rd, and go ahead with the roll call, please, Tammy.
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Mr. Klein,
Here.
Ms. Butler,
Here.
Mr. Imes.
Here.
Okay, seems we have all commissioners present. We have a quorum. Moving on to the agenda as written and its approval. We do have some slight recommendations for modification of the agenda, being E2 and E3, which are the two resolutions that go along with the small cell systems, the fees and the fines, to be more specific. Those are going to be a comment drafted and made by Mr. Alex Pline, a commissioner on our commission. And he was unable to get that done in the very short time between the last meeting and this one. So we're going to go ahead and continue with those items as on the agenda. But just note when we get to them that Mr. Pline's draft recommendation is still not completed for that. So I didn't want to remove that from the agenda because we still might want to talk or have a question on each small cell system, the fees and the fines when we get to it. So does anybody have an issue with that, or would rather strike them from the agenda? Please speak now. Otherwise, we'll continue with the agenda as written.
That's okay.
All right, thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. And also, there are some miscellaneous items since the last meeting to now that we said we would talk about in this meeting. Sometimes we talk about those at the beginning, we will not. We'll wait till the miscellaneous section in E, which is not really E. It should be, I would believe that'd be F. And so that makes F, G, and H. So you see E, F, and G on the agenda. It doesn't really flow alphabetically. So that's a slight error on the agenda. So we will, we just have to modify it to make sure that items E, F, and G change to the next letter in the alphabet. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Does anyone have an issue with that? That's just a clerical error. No need for a vote. Okay. And so please annotate those on your agendas right now. Items E, F, and G are now F, G, and H. All right, moving on to the approval of minutes. The minutes, everyone should have seen those emailed out by Tammy and should have had a chance to review those. I can also bring them up here for display if anyone would like. I will go ahead and display those now. Sharing my screen. And everyone should be able to see these minutes from September 3rd. I, of course, was not there. I was on vacation. Thank you very much. And I will scroll down. So Mr. Waldman, please go ahead and take the reins on this one if anything needs to be changed or with the rest of the commission.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of September 3rd.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain since I wasn't here. Any nays? All right, looks like it passes. And of note, the opinion that's in there that was approved, we have since seen a revision to that opinion that we should talk about today. Now, we could bring that up later on in the miscellaneous section, or we could talk about it now. Mr. Waldman, do you have a preference on that, or the rest of the commission?
Well, it seems fairly clear, and it was circulated, and perhaps we could deal with it now and get rid of it. And it's the next item on the agenda in any case, or it's this item that we're now on. The amendment that was requested is to basically provide flexibility to the applicant in the number of rooms, but not to the footprint or any aspects of the site design that is part of the application, in that somebody may purchase or somebody may be willing to manage this hotel and they would want smaller rooms even than the rooms that they have. My personal opinion is that it doesn't make any difference. I noted that there was no discussion of the number of rooms or how they were laid out or really much of the functions of the hotel at all. 98%, if not all of our time was spent on site design issues. That's my only observation. And also just for process interest, somewhere in the recesses of my brain is something that when the commission makes a decision and they wish to amend it and bring it up at the next meeting by somebody who voted in favor of that decision at the first meeting, that they can do so. And that this fits squarely into that exception.
Can you say that real quick one more time to get that in my head? So if you vote for it in the previous meeting, if you're someone who votes for it, then you're allowed to bring it up at the next meeting in what capacity?
Well, as an amendment to the decision that was made earlier. You
Okay.
the commission can review its earlier decision without notice and so forth. So anyway, I think we're in good situation here.
And I think important in my mind to it is you're not changing a massive part of the overall design that was really debated in the last part, and you bring that up. But how many rooms would the extension be to? We need to get that out there. And do we have anything from? I would think we would want to, have the developer state here in public exactly what the change is, so everybody is clear about that in a public forum. Do you think that's okay? I think that would be necessary. Anyone else?
I don't know, from what was presented to us, I don't know that they know. But in terms of what the language that was passed to us by Mr. Beard is that it wouldn't change the footprint of the of the building, and I think that language needs to say nothing about this, and I don't know what the right language is, but nothing about the footprint, impervious area, or the site plan. It can change. However they want to configure the inside of the building, I don't really care. Frankly, I think more smaller rooms is better because they'll be less expensive per night, and that's probably a good thing. Because we have lots of other expensive hotels in the city. But I think we want to make sure that it's ironclad that, they can't increase the parking, can't increase the impervious space, can't make any changes outside the building. And I don't know what the right language is there, but what was passed to us, I think was too narrow, because it just said the footprint of the building. That doesn't mean, that leaves a lot of squish room for putting in more parking and, assuming they don't violate other conditions. But I think we want to have that nailed down, that basically nothing can change outside the building. How they configuring the inside of the building doesn't matter.
Okay, so instead of the words footprint, how about inserting site design as the site design as approved?
If you guys think that meets the intent of what I mentioned, I'm okay with that. But then again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't, I don't know where people can find squish there.
I mean, how many rooms are we talking for an increase? I mean, we're talking, I know this sounds crazy, but when I traveled to Japan, you have these micro hotels, which are starting to come popular in New York. Are you talking micro rooms and you're going to make it now 200? Or is it, we talking just like the 160 from 134, something smaller along those lines? Any idea? Anyone? Tom, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it was presented to me that like a handful of rooms difference, half a dozen is what I was told. So they just wanted some flexibility depending on who the hotelier may be. I doubt that it's more than that.
How
we
about
give them
putting a
a-
limit on it, like 10%? Is that flexible?
How about
Is
you
that
just say
sufficient
10?
flexibility?
Yeah.
And being that it's already over parked, again, I'm with
It is.
Alex. Really doesn't matter what happens inside the building, as long as outside doesn't change, we're fine with that.
10% gives them 13 and a half rooms. I think that's an easy thing to do. Is that limiting? I mean, what if they get rid of one of those common areas and, could throw even more than that in? At least we should cap it at something, I feel. 10% sounds logical. Does that make sense, Tom, or is that not?
It makes sense to me. It's within the parameters that was presented to me. I know, if you want to just err on the side, you can make it 15%. Again, it's so overparked. There's plenty of room for that as far as increasing the number of rooms.
Mhm.
Just doesn't change the design of the building, doesn't on the outside, doesn't change the site plan, just the inside.
Not on us. If we're sitting here saying it's overparked, then why are we even putting that asphalt down? We should have that as a green space,
Well,
Why are
I
we-
think there's a
I was
Why are we
line,
doing that?
Mr. Chairman, between what the code requirements are and what hoteliers want for their patrons, right?
I got you. And neither of the twain shall meet in common agreement. So
Yes, sir.
what's everybody else think?
Well, I do think we've talked a lot about what this hotel is, besides just the outside of it, that what style of hotel it is. It's a business style, limited service hotel. I don't think there's an issue with how many rooms we add. I think it's a good idea to put the cap of 10% on, because that's really 13 rooms. That should be plenty if he's only telling you a handful. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I do think you could negotiate for that concrete, and we can play hardball.
You want to change, get rid of some parking, get rid of a parking space or two if we're overparked, why not? Anybody else want to fight for that? At this point, it's restrictive at this point.
I was kidding.
I'm not known for being easy on applicants, but at this point, I think that this is rather a cooked meal. And I hesitate to get back into it, especially with something that is as major as concrete instead of asphalt.
No, absolutely.
And without the plans in front of me to look to see if where there could be 2 or 3 parking spaces that could be changed. I'm
Not
not,
worth the
I
fight.
personally am not inclined to go back into it to that extent.
I was just kidding with you, Ben.
Okay, so if there's an agreement, I would make a motion to
Pretty simple, 10%.
there's a proposed additional condition of number 25, which reads, final room count is subject to change, provided there is no change to the footprint of the building. So what I would propose that how that condition read would be as follows.
The condition already exists and it sounds like they can already do it. Why are we even talking about it?
No, this is the proposed
It's your
additional
proposal,
condition, the amendment. Final room count is subject to a change not to exceed 15%, provided there's no change to the site design as approved.
I think 15% is fair, because if you think of a 15% reduction in all the rooms, or, I mean, yeah,
That's like 20 rooms.
yeah. I know this design, it could accommodate that.
Mr. Beard, do you feel like that fairly completely reflects what's needed?
Yes, and certainly you could say, Tom, you can pipe in here, but if it covers the impervious area and other issues, this by restricting the site plan. Otherwise, you just say, provide the site plan and the impervious areas are not changed.
Okay, it does, you can add that, provided the site plan, including impervious areas, do not change, or however I said it, as approved.
Right.
Okay, it's just being very clear, but so that's the motion.
Just so everyone understands, I had some additions for technical requirements, and I don't hear any comment about it. So you are approving the revised opinion that address requirements pertaining to approving a modification of the plan development and preliminary record plat, and not only the site design. And the opinion referenced deliberations in the staff report and cites various code findings. So those technical requirements have been added as well.
That's in the beginning?
It's throughout the opinion.
Okay.
The opinion expanded.
Okay. Okay. I would move to approve the decision and opinion as amended.
Okay, so that's the second motion. Anyone want a
No,
second?
That's the motion.
Okay.
Just to make it clear. Yeah, I'm
Got
just
it.
trying to be clear.
With the 15%. Okay.
Okay?
So here a second.
Second,
Thank you, Alex. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstentions? None. All right, passes.
I'll be leaving the meeting and making those changes. So send me any comments you may have if anything arises.
Thank you, Mr.
And-
Beard.
All
And
right.
then can we get everyone's approval now to have staff sign for the planning commission, since we can't do that remotely?
Yeah, Mr. Beard, before you leave, there was, I was going to bring that up in miscellany, but now's a good time. We can go ahead and attack it now. But signing for opinions by the commission, whether it's the chairman or if the vice chairman or other commissioners, would it be okay for staff if we passed a resolution here that the staff could sign for us as long as we voted for the opinion as was written? I mean, now honestly, if you vote for it, that should be as good as your signature. And then I would think the opinion could be drafted out and finally signed by the director and put up the chaining of command. But if not the case, and we have to
think
have
that-
one of our signatures.
I think that's fine. And even the president was established with Gary Elson signing on behalf of the members. So I'll be sending to staff the approved opinion with a change. If you delegate it to yourself, or it could be anyone, I suggest either you or me.
So everyone, what do you think? You have problems with that? And obviously, because of COVID, people don't want to make the whole,
I'm comfortable with Mr. Beard signing.
you good with it? Okay, everybody else? So
Agreed.
anyone else? Comments?
Mr. Beard, or with city staff, or both?
Which is the most convenient?
I think Beard would be convenient.
I'll sign it and send it on to the city and,
Good.
all right.
All right, so
Thank you.
as a rule of procedure here for the commission, I make a motion that we approve a process change. So instead of physical signatures on opinions can be done by our legal representative, Mr. Chris Beard, or whom it is for that opinion, in lieu of us signing as a commissioner, for any commissioner, whether it's the chair, vice chair, or any other. Another second?
Second.
And that could be incorporated in the rules of procedure you have.
Yeah, we're gonna need to incorporate that and clarify the rules of procedure. I'll have to draft that and send it to everyone. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, abstentions? Motion passes. Rule of procedure change will be headed your way for your final signature.
Very well.
All right,
Take care, everyone.
thank you. All right, now moving on to, which we just covered, the revised opinion. Moving on to public hearings. We have currently opened the small cell system, so we're now going to open public hearing. Item E1, small cell systems for the purpose of establishing requirements for small cell systems, adding small cell system antennas as a use subject to standards in all zoning districts, and this is continued from the September 3rd meeting. This item is separate from two other parts of it, which are the small cell system fees and the small cell system fines. Those two items, Mr. Alex Pline has not yet completed his draft on those. And we still have item number 1 still open. So since the last meeting, and we'd like to go through on process here, staff, any changes to the briefing or changes with the item need to brief commissioners, we can ask the staff, and then public comments, if any additional received, and then commission deliberation, the standard, even for an item that's continued. So we'll go right to staff on item E1. Are there any changes to brief or anything you need to mention before we go into commissioner comments?
No changes, but you weren't at the last meeting where we just, oh, you were, and you were at one meeting where we discussed this. But what the idea was that Alex was going to take a stab at some proposed amendments and either to the ordinance or maybe moving some ordinance text into the guidelines and going from there. And
Yes, that was very much what we talked about is simplifying it and moving a lot of stuff out of code into guidelines with discretion and on those guidelines for the planning and zoning director. And I apologize for not getting that done. I don't even have a dog to blame it on for eating my homework.
Dr.
So we'll
Nash.
just
is
continue,
there-
if
is
you
there
don't
any-
mind, we continue. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, so we could continue it to the next meeting if there's not any other comments on it.
All three items you're recommending, right?
Yes.
Yes, the resolutions travel with the ordinance.
And since Bob held the last meeting with the meat and potatoes, this Bob, you got any comments with this? Go ahead.
My only question is there any time pressure on this? Dr. Nash?
No immediate time pressure. I mean, the only pressure we're getting is from the industry who wants to start installing these, but
Oh, no.
so we can't delay forever, but it certainly doesn't need to happen this meeting or, even necessarily by the next meeting.
Mr. Pline, what's your schedule?
I will endeavor to do it by the next meeting.
I move that we can continue this, but all three of these items to at least the next meeting.
But that's a great idea, but I'd like, since it's still open for commissioner comment right now, I'd still like to throw one quick item in there, since I'll have you all here. Two comments, actually. One, working with Alex in the off time on these modifications or whatnot, is there any problem with us, zooming in with Alex to see, talk about these modifications, or is that kind of out of line? I think that'd be okay if he's drafting them. Might as well get us working together in advance. Anyone have any comments on that?
Well, I would like to see what he's done and circulated them, and then if there's a cause for a special meeting or a work
Fair.
session, then I think so. But I think we need to see stuff. And I also would like to get a little better idea from Dr. Nash as to what you're seeing in terms of the guidelines, the specifics, the regulations that'll be issued, the size, the shape, how many on a pole, what kinds of poles, how high up those boxes are, those kinds of things. I'd really like to get some ideas to what what you think the changes ought to be, or how we should proceed in discussing them.
And Sally, before you respond to that, I'd like to add on to your question, to the question posed to you.
Yeah.
How would cell phone providers be sharing the same antenna that was put up on a telephone pole, or like with cell phone towers now, would they all have to have their own? So if you have a telephone pole, let's say on West Street, that is a great 5G position, would you have to have the very next telephone pole be for the next company and the next company? Because there's generally about 4 major companies that provide cell phone tower, generally 4, and there's subordinates to them. And also there's already 5G antennas up outside, just outside the city limits. If you go near the mall or Route 2, go to Edgewater, you will see them, and you will see what they look like just as they've been shown to us in these documents provided by the staff. So they already exist on top of telephone poles with the brown covering. So that's my question to you, Dr. Nash. Would different cell phone providers have to have a different pole? Can they share the same one? And yeah, there's some out there for everybody to look at. Over to you.
So as we have the guidelines drafted now, we require co-location unless they can show for some reason that that's not feasible. So they are required to share poles. Maybe I can work on a web page and put some examples of guidelines from other jurisdictions and some other information, and share that link with you so you can see what it looks like in other places, and that can give you some ideas for what you want to see here.
From my basic understanding of, and I've done some research on small cell systems, I don't know if they could share the same pole without it being like the same antenna that's 3 feet on top of another 3-foot antenna on top of another one. So that's what I want clarity on. Can they?
Yeah,
share
I'm not
the same-
sure about that, but
Can they share the same antenna and share bandwidth frequencies among that one antenna, or do they have to stack them somehow, or make a unified array? That's really
yeah, good question. We should find out about. I will see if I can find that out.
yeah, because you would see 4 in a row. Imagine going on West Street and you see 4 in a row on tops of telephone poles. I mean,
Right.
honestly, if you drive outside of the city and see them, they're really, you kind of get used to them. Because I've seen them a lot over the last 2-3 weeks. I've even seen them outside of Maryland. So it's something for everybody to think of.
Okay.
And back to Mr. Waldman's motion to
Continue
move.
this until, I don't know, until the next meeting or until,
The next meeting is October 1st.
oh, that's only a week.
That's right. That's right. 1 week. Alex? 1 week. Well, we
Sorry, that's
gotta
a week from
continue it anyway.
tomorrow. Yeah,
We'll continue it, and if it's ready, it's ready. It's not, it's not. right?
Okay,
just not a huge hurry on this.
okay.
There are
Okay,
things
so
pressing.
Mr. Wallman has a motion to continue these items to the next meeting. I'll second
Well,
that. motion.
let me amend that, to continue it indefinitely. And then when it's ready, it'll go on the agenda.
That's a better idea, I feel. Everyone.
Well, if it's on next week's agenda, don't we have to say that now? To give notice?
Well, no,
Okay.
I don't know that that's necessary.
Okay.
Well, maybe we could have it on the agenda just in case, and then we could
Okay.
always postpone it.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, the public deserves advanced notice. And 1 week with our current schedule is not really cutting the mustard for some items, if you understand what I'm saying. So the agenda for a week from now is actually, supposed to already be out there and done. So, but but items that are continued are already in work, in my belief, in process, and you could logically continue them to the next meeting without any more advance notice, because you've already given the advance notice by having them on the agenda tonight. So if we continue it,
You're right, and the public hearing remains open.
yeah, exactly. So
We can always
I think-
continue the public hearing next week.
Okay,
there you go. Working,
We
all
could
right.
also always set up a work session if you want to have a more informal discussion about the guidelines
Yeah, in
and
between.
what Alex is working on.
Okay.
okay,
I will second Mr. Waldman's original motion to continue these 3 items, E1 through 3, till our next meeting, October 1st, which is a week away. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Items E1 through 3 continue to our next meeting in a week on October 1st, Thursday. All right, moving on to public item E4, 019-19, adequate public facilities, auto transportation facilities for the purpose of clarifying the circumstance that will require traffic impact analysis for proposed project. And this is continued from September 3rd, which meeting I was not at. So over to staff, any changes that you'd want to brief or add to this?
Nope, no changes from last time. And again, this ordinance also doesn't really have a time sensitivity.
Okay, does that conclude for staff? Over to commissioners, any comments or questions from the staff before we go on to public comments?
I would like Mr. Brathwaite to review and respond to what I proposed, see if I'm on the right track and what he thinks about the language. And if there is no time pressure on this, I would make a similar motion that I made before with small cells, that legislation, that but in this case, I think we should stay on it and place it on the agenda for next meeting, because I think that it needs to move. You know, as applications come in, this stuff needs to we need to know what we're doing. And this has been in the works for a long time, and it's important stuff, and it should get to the council so they can make a decision. So that's I'll make that motion that we continue it and that the matter be referred to the Office of Law for their comments.
This is Joe Albright from the Office of Law. Thank you for the work that you did, and we have received your comments and your work, and we are happy to continue to review and work with everyone towards getting the legislation to where it should be. And specifically, this is legislation that's going to help create regulation also for this particular APF.
Now, do you think you can you'll be able to weigh in officially next meeting?
1 week.
I heard that it was 1 week away. That might be too short of a timeline for turnaround, since we have a trial on the 29th and we have, we have a trial in 6 days, I believe.
Okay, and the next meeting would be October 28th, so that would be 5 weeks from today.
5 weeks seems to be appropriate in terms of the turnaround. That could also work with the Director of Planning and Zoning so that we could get everything in the right shape so that we could present it to you guys again.
If we're going to continue it on into the third week of October, I would request that whatever you get done in writing is that you circulate it before the meeting so that we have we'll have a more informed discussion. Is that a fair request?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, then my motion is to continue this to what was the date, Mr. Sale? October what?
October 28th, which is a Wednesday.
Okay. Then I'll suggest that this be on the October 28th agenda and that the public hearing shall remain open.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay, the motion passes to continue that item. And to make sure, for public comment from staff, I believe we have received no additional public comments for item E4. Is there any reason that would be incorrect?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. All right, and that ends the public hearing items for today. So the public hearing items are now closed. And we move on to item E, which is now F, because we had the agenda change the alphabetical listing there. Miscellany, and I have 3 items to bring up here. And I'm sorry that Chris Beard left. I should have asked him before he left, but there was some training he wanted to give to us on the commission. And there's been some times that have been tossed around. We have 1 week till our next meeting, and then a 4-week period between that meeting and the next one. So I would think that you would all want this training, which is going to be about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, to happen after our next meeting. So I'm going to I'd like to do it during daytime, afternoon hours. Is anybody averse to that, or you want to stick to 5 or 6 o'clock? I mean, I'm open for anything. Anybody have any limitations, or should we just throw out a Wednesday or best days of the week, like a Wednesday, 5 to 7 or 4 to 6?
I'm better with later in the day than early afternoon.
Okay.
I'm better with after 4.
After 4?
After 4 or before 10 is what I'm better for.
Okay,
I'm pretty busy at work right now with board meetings and
I got you. So does 4 really work, or 4:30 better for you?
for anytime after 4. Anytime after 4 is fine. That would work, depending on the day, of course, because I do serve on a lot of volunteer committees too, and I have a lot of meetings in the evenings as well as this one.
A lot of us do. So how about a 4 to 6, everyone? I'll just throw this out there. Our next meeting is October 1st, Thursday. The week after that, how about we just throw out, Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m.? That'd be October 6th. Does that work for everyone here?
Tuesdays and Thursdays work fine for me.
Okay. Figure we just start with a date. How about that? And then we can always modify it later. So Tuesday, October 6th, 4 to 6 p.m. for training. All right. I'll propose that to Mr. Chris Beard, our legal representation for the training. And Joelle, do you know what the subject of that training is, by the way?
No, I believe the training is currently being developed.
What is the subject?
I believe the training is under development, so I can't comment until we understand what the purpose is in our 2 hours.
Hey,
So
Joel,
we're training on something. Maybe it's ex parte communications. Maybe it's something else. Process. I don't know.
hey Joel, I have a quick question for you. How do you
Yes, sir.
pronounce your first and last name?
My name is Joel Braithwaite.
Braithwaite. Okay.
Braithwaite, okay.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure that it wasn't Joel Braithwaite.
Lovecraft Country is helping the pronunciation and spreading of my name nationwide, apparently.
You're awesome. All right. There also now we'll go down to meeting schedule. We had some talk in the off time. Somebody brought up the subject of, hey, why don't we make all our meetings Thursdays instead of the second meeting being on Wednesday? So as a first iteration, I went to Sally and said, well, if we moved our Wednesday meeting to a Thursday, either the week before or that week, what would be the problems? And really, you'd want to move it to the week prior, so we don't have this 1 week between meetings. We want to space it out where it's more equal between meetings, not 4 weeks between one and then 1 or 2 weeks between the other. So you'd go not the 4th Wednesday of the month, you would maybe do the 3rd Wednesday or the 3rd Thursday. The problem with going to one of those days is it conflicts with the HPC meeting, and I believe you might sometimes not be able to get your planning department representation that you'd want. So Sally, was that HPC meeting on Thursdays or Wednesdays?
That was on Thursday.
Thursday. So if we want to switch, and Hillary said there shouldn't be a problem from the city side, and we still would need to double check before we do it. We would switch our the 4th Wednesday of the month to now be the 3rd Wednesday of the month. Seems to me to be logical. Does anybody else have any wants, or would you want to keep it like it is?
I think we go back to one meeting a month.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I just think that sometimes, with doing things so quickly and we're doing things on Zoom all the time, that I really think a lot of the public is not really engaged, and things are getting kind of pushed through without a lot of public scrutiny because we're not having meetings anymore. So I'm just wondering if it's a positive thing or not that we're getting.
Well, I actually do have good news on that front, is that you don't actually have a meeting the first week in October. Sorry, Jackie just texted me that. So the small cell legislation will have to go the 28th.
Why don't we have the first Thursday in October?
Oh, that's true. Okay, so wait, I'm getting text here. The 3rd Wednesdays are Board of Appeals. Okay. Hillary said we could have the 3rd Wednesdays during COVID only.
Right.
I think I don't care about changing it. I can always work around what I.
Okay, I think for, at least for October, we should keep it the 28th. Because I know Board of Appeals has a meeting, the 21st. So that is the date. That third Wednesday used to be for either Planning Commission or Board of Appeals, whoever needed it.
So
If I could
Wednesday,
type out-
October 21st is the third Wednesday.
And that's Board of Appeals meeting. So
How about we try it out this first month? Move it up to the Wednesday of the week prior than we normally would do.
well, that's what I'm saying. We can't do that in October.
Because of the Board of Appeals.
Yeah,
Well, because planning and zoning staff will be at the Board of Appeals, is that it?
I will be at Board of Appeals.
Do we have to have you?
Well, where will Tammy be too?
Well, it's for the ordinances, if you're discussing the ordinances. I could come to Planning Commission instead of Board of Appeals.
You can't send the subordinate to, or somebody else to represent?
Uh,
Not wise?
oh, let's see, Jackie says I meant third Thursday. Oh, okay, so the third Thursday is an option though.
That's what I was going to say before. We used to meet the first and third Thursday of each month. Long time ago.
Yeah, but that was due to needing of the city council chambers. Now we have Zoom, so it's just a
Well-
matter of,
But we
Right.
still have limitations on the Zoom.
because of your representation though. The Zoom limitations are because of planning staff representation. I didn't think we had a limitation from the city.
No, the city only has 2 Zoom accounts and you have to have staff available from the, like how Julian is running this meeting, he has to be available and not in another meeting and not having exceeded the number of hours can work in 1 week, even though he's very dedicated.
So you can't have more than 2 meetings at the same time. And on Wednesdays, we're violating that, you're saying.
Yes, but
Third
the
Wednesday.
third Thursday seems to be available.
But then that conflicts with a HPC.
No, the HGC meets the fourth Thursday of each month.
That's okay. All right. Well, then we make it,
And I might not be available on the 28th.
Oh, okay.
It's not a big deal though, because you could probably get somebody to cover for me.
Are you available on the 22nd,
What day is that?
a Thursday?
that's the fourth Thursday of the
No,
month.
it's the third Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's make
know
it
what?
the third.
Thursday, I'm available, yes.
This
I'm
is-
sorry, Ben is right. That is, October has 5
Five.
Thursdays.
It's got
So
five.
that is, so how
The 15th.
about October 15th?
Yeah,
That's fine with me.
Okay, I might need to double check that with Hillary.
all right, let's go with that. Let's make that a double check with Hillary, October 15th. We'll shift it to the third Thursday. So the first and third Thursdays of every month, and we'll start with October and see how that works. Fair enough?
Okay, it does look like on the city calendar that's available. So I think that's a good sign. So October 15th.
All right, but of course, that doesn't allay Mr. Iam's concerns of we're meeting a lot and getting things done without maybe perhaps getting appropriate public comment, which goes into my other item, is there was also talk over the last month outside of public hearings of maybe a process for public participation with much advance notice to actually participate in these Zoom meetings, which would actually give you more of a exact replica of what we used to do in the city council chambers. Does anybody have any comments with it? Nobody's done it yet, as far as I know, and it's not a standard by the city, but it's something we could at least talk about. What do you
Well,
think?
the county council has started doing audio only. So there's a model.
That's how, I didn't know they were doing audio only. I thought it was, okay, so that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and our city council has started that too, although no one has actually done it yet, but they now have the capability. I don't know, and maybe Julian can speak to that for other than city council. I haven't heard any discussion of that.
Yeah, we've had one person, well, now two people sign up. The first person didn't show. This coming Tuesday, we'll see how it goes. We have one person signed up for that then, so.
I've thought about it, and I've thought about it at length, and, you know, if people apply, just like they apply to the website, to planning and zoning to make comment, and they also maybe check a block that says they would like to present their comments. If they want to present their comments, they can check that. And then we could vet them before the meeting maybe, or Julian, you got a process?
So that's exactly what we're doing. So it's the same form that people use to actually sign up to do public testimony, to do written testimony.
Mhm.
And there's a box that they check and say if they want to do it live. We then will get their information and then the day of send them actually credentials to join the meeting. And they would stay as audio only.
And we have the ability to mute them. So if anything went awry, you could just mute really quickly. So it's not
Exactly.
get out of control. And you could also limit their time. City council, they're still limiting the timeline for people to talk,
3 minutes.
standard 3 minutes.
Yep.
And we could do that as well. I like the idea. And I think letting the city council go through it first and solidifying that, it sounds great. And then we would start maybe in November, not October, but November. Does anybody have any comments?
Well, this sounds like longer meetings. Otherwise, it's fine.
Logical?
I mean, so just so you guys know, we've offered it in city council now for since September. The last meeting in September was the first one we went live with this. And literally this is the second person we've had sign up for doing live testimony through Zoom. So-
The benefit, as I understand it, is that we can go back to not having to do each item that has a public hearing on two consecutive meeting dates, where we have to open it, wait till the next meeting to receive online feedback. It could all happen within the context of the same meeting. That's the benefit.
Yes, that's a good point, Alex. I think that would save us a lot of time. It may, you know, I don't know.
And just so you guys know too, we're in talks with Hillary as well already about doing that, like trying to move this forward with commissions. And we're
Mhm.
putting together like documents basically right now to say, okay, this is how we would approach it. So these things are kind of in motion too.
So it's already in work for us kind of, you know, to happen. And well, let's be realistic, December probably sounds like y'all would probably have that.
I think if you plan for that, I think that'd be pretty spot on.
So, okay, well then we wait for it. I'm all for it. Anyone else?
I agree.
Okay.
I think it makes sense.
Anyone? Okay, well, we'll stand by for what the city direction is that comes down the pipe on the public comments versus being done personally if they want versus just reading them. And then that would also shorten up, we could have all the hearings done in one meeting, vice additional meetings. Now, there is one other item. Sometimes the public comment, we see people in the audience that want to make additional comment, but that draws out meetings. We wouldn't normally do that, but only under extreme circumstances where we feel we need to call people back up. I still think we could handle that. All right, well, that takes care of that. So to go over our miscellaneous items, the training for the commission, we're going to look at October 6th, 4 to 6 p.m. We'll throw that Chris's way. And if that doesn't work for that week, we'll have them do other dates from 4 to 6 p.m. during that week. Meeting schedule, we're going to look at doing the second meeting of the month on the third Thursday of October, and we'll also try to do that in November and see how that works. The action to Sally to double check with Hillary. Also, and last, our public process for participation with advance notice. The city's obviously doing something, and that'll feed down to us for hopefully implementation no later than December. And perhaps we can get it into our November meetings as well, second session. Any other items from miscellaneous that anyone wants to bring up or thinks that we should talk about? Fantastic. Anything left, Tammy, that we need to make sure and process or documentation?
No.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, well, looks like the next item on the agenda will be adjournment. I would like to move that we adjourn this meeting and then proceed on to work session. I'm moving.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? None. Hearing none, meeting's adjourned and moving on to public work session at 54 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful. All right, so let's get this work session going. Let's get everybody who needs to present up to speed. Everyone, please break out your massive set of life-size plans for the Bemby Beach development, which we have had in front of the commission since numerous times before, I believe 2012 or maybe even earlier. And Sally, you got any comments before we go straight to the developer or staff? Any commissioner comments you want to make before we go on to the presentation?
I'm going to turn this over first to, I don't know if Tom or Cindy, which one of you wants to start us off?
Cynthia's been the lead planner. I'm happy to let Cynthia.
Okay, this is a work session for the Chesapeake Grove at Bemby Beach planned unit development project. You're correct that it's been in our system since 2012. It also came to a work session back in 2018. You did receive a little memo kind of summarizing the project and where we are currently. There is a new architecture firm that's been hired with some new architecture that includes Leo Wilson, who will be making the presentation tonight. And if you have any questions for staff, I'll be happy to answer those.
Ms. Godinez,
Yes.
thank you for your little memo that covered this. I appreciate it. It helps us get off, provides a background and a context. But my questions have to do with the very last paragraph in which you mentioned key topics of recent discussion.
Yes.
I'd like you to expand on, I'm going to ask you about each one of those. What has been the discussion with respect to public access?
Well, recently there has been some discussion from the owner and developer regarding potentially providing easements that will be turned over to the Annapolis Conservancy Board. We don't have any details on that to date. This discussion just recently began.
What about in terms of public access to the water, how that's going to be made clear to the public, you know, where they will be allowed and not allowed, whether kayaks and other personal craft will be permitted, where people might drive to offload a kayak or a canoe, and then where would they park, those kinds of things. And also, I think, I personally don't know what the state law is on the public right-of-way on the shoreline. That might be helpful, but those are some thoughts that come to my mind with respect to public access, to make sure that there is actually access that's useful, but that's not impinging upon the peace and quiet of the people who purchased residences here. So we might get some answers to that tonight. When you say the total unit count and tightness of development, what specifically do you mean by that?
Well, initially, there was, from the beginning, about 41 units proposed. It went up to about 45 at one point, and now it's down to 42. However, the site has become more restricted over time as the wetland has grown and obviously taken up some of the buildable area on the site.
So when you say tightness of development, what do you mean by that?
Well, I guess we have a concern about being able to get around some of the unit blocks. There's a lot of planting that's required that they've used that area for. There's stormwater management devices. And so we're just concerned whether everything is a bit tight. Just, there isn't quite enough room potentially to maneuver and for maintenance purposes, those type of things.
Well, okay, it might be some specifics and, that could help us out in that.
Well, there's also some stormwater management concerns regarding that as well.
Uh-huh.
There's a, there's a list of things that the stormwater management engineer and the Bay Engineering have been discussing regarding making some of those issues, try to get some of those issues resolved, and whether there's, space to be able to do that adequately.
Where are the places that you're concerned about?
I think just the whole thing in general. I mean, I'm not the stormwater management engineer, so I can't speak to those directly as far as anything. And this is I also want to point out that this is we have not reviewed this current plan as a formal submittal. This is new since they've hired a new architect and wanted to come to a work session to get some feedback on the new direction. We're also concerned, as I mentioned, that the wetlands have grown, and that kind of gets into the next area, I think, on that list of items about growth of the environmentally sensitive areas. And so the wetland has grown, and we're kind of concerned as to whether, is there going to be a continual growth of that wetland? And there are 2 units on the plan that are basically wedged in between the wetland buffer and the 100-foot buffer of the critical area. And so that's an area that's pretty tight that we're concerned about as well.
Do you know why this wetland has grown?
Tom, do you want to pipe in on that? Or maybe that's something that the applicants should address during their presentation.
Yes, Cynthia, I'm hoping the applicants can shed some more light, but it's my understanding both an increase in rain events over the last several years, an increase in runoff, but I'm not sure that explains the ponding and the increase in the size of the wetland. And yes, Commissioner Waldman, we are concerned about additional growth and increase in the size of that wetland in the future, as well as in the design development, the amount of water flowing from stormwater management devices into the wetland, so we don't increase the size and flood additional or decrease and dry the wetland.
Okay. Ms. Godinez, what did you mean by tree mitigation and fee in lieu?
So the applicant has a lot of trees that are required to be planted. And currently there are about 386, I believe, on this current plan that they plan on paying for in fee of lieu. And they have looked in the past for off-site places, but have been unsuccessful in finding an area at this time. But they will have to pay a fee in lieu, and the fee in lieu has recently been changed, and I'm not sure the applicant is aware of this, but the fee in lieu on sites that are 40,000 square feet or greater has increased from $1,250 a tree to $2,000 a tree.
And this site is more than 40,000 square feet.
Yes, it's over 5 acres.
Okay, so do you have some sense about where the trees, the subject trees are, and how where they'll be affected?
Well, the trees on the site are going to be removed. They're going to plant the trees, as much of the mitigation that's required on the site. And then the remaining, they're proposing to pay the fee in lieu. And then that money comes to the city that's held in a special fund. And then we potentially use that money for other projects, additional environmental projects.
But this is just an initial kind of proposal at this point, not really a formal application. So you haven't gone through and really identified which trees really need to be saved, and so forth and so on.
Not on this current version. We have on past submittals, but not on this current one as going to be presented tonight.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks. This is beginning to give me some idea where I might want to go. Thank you. I don't think I have any further questions at this point of staff. Oh, maybe I could ask this pump station. What are we pumping here? Ms. Gudenius, what are we
That's
pumping?
that's the sewer, the sewer. And I think Terry
Sewer
Schuman can,
pumps.
yeah, the sewer pump. You've got to
Okay.
pump it's lower elevation there, so they have to pump it up. They have to have a sewer pump to force it.
Okay, so it's servicing on site, the site as a whole.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay, I guess I don't have any further questions of staff at this point. I don't.
I have one question concerning the, what's labeled as the public road A. From the previous plan, was that, I can't remember, was that a public road, or is that something is that new, that it's going to be turned over to the city?
It's always been delineated as a public right of way.
Yeah, there's one main public road, and then there's like a driveway for the rear loaded townhouses.
Right, I couldn't remember whether that main road was designated as private in the past or not, but thank
What
you
about
for
the-
the clarification.
Public.
Yeah, it's been public.
And the road on the northern boundary of the property, which looks to be wider than, my memory does not serve me enough to remember the details of prior plans, but there's a road on the northern edge of the property. Is that public also?
There's a private drive that runs behind the rear loaded, basically the rear loaded townhouses. I believe some of your questions could probably be answered
Okay,
during the presentation.
okay,
And then maybe more questions after that might be better at this
Okay.
point. So that you can see what they're currently proposing, and maybe they can address some of these key issues that you're bringing up.
okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
I have a quick question, Cynthia. So currently, there is no application in review for us. This is just still a work session. So all previous applications have been ceased, correct?
Well,
No.
it's still a formal project.
Yeah.
We just do not have a formal submittal for this plan that has gone out for agency review. So we don't have calculations for this particular plan for the stormwater management engineer to look at. We haven't looked at all the zoning issues as far as the architecture and the site design review and everything fitting the tree, how this impacts the trees compared to previous plans. We have not looked at all the details of that at this point.
So the submittal is still in play. It's just this is another iteration. And what I'm asking for is
That's
for
correct.
ex parte communications on the matter. Are we allowed to talk to anybody since it's a work session on this item outside? I would think no.
That's
Well,
not a question. That's a question for law.
Right. Mr. Chairman, this is a revision to the original application. So it's the same application, project number, file. This is just yet another iteration.
Right.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh,
Are you able
And
to talk outside of this a public venue to members of the public on it, or, I mean, it's being reviewed by planning and zoning, but hasn't been submitted yet to the planning commission formally.
Right, Ben, but you should still not talk about it outside of venues that are public and accessible to everyone.
All right?
You should not deliberate about it when you're not on the public record.
Unduly influenced on the matter. Okay, let's make that.
I have a
known.
quick question, Sally. So I have some friends that work for the Chesapeake Conservancy, and they did these great models of what flooding looks like over 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and just what climate change does to Chesapeake Bay. And I wanted to look at a model of this and see, what this site will look like in 20 years, because obviously it'll have a fiscal impact on our city depending on, what it does. So am I allowed to get the Chesapeake Conservancy model? I would be happy to share it with everyone so they can see. but it also goes to the fiscal sustainability of the site. And I just don't know if that is outside the bounds of what we can get.
This is Joel from Office of Law. I think the real question is the information you receive going to affect the deliberations? To the extent the conversation and the information you receive changes your opinion or informs your opinion, it deprives the other members of the board from having access to the same information.
No, I just said, Joelle, I just said, you may not have heard me, that I would happily share it with everyone. So I would get the model, get the link, and then send it to everyone so we can all take a look at it.
Well,
Well,
actually,
they could certainly submit it as, you know, as their comment, as testimony.
But they don't even know about this. So they're not even interested because they don't even know about it. I would just be seeking information that might help us understand about the sustainability of this site. They're not going to know about it unless I call and say, can you send me the link to your model that shows what climate change does to this, you know, over 10, 20, 30 years. So I'm basically asking them for the link to share with you all.
So as Mr. Wallman suggested, they can submit any information they would like everyone to consider. And
how will they know? But how will they know about it? They don't know about this case. So they're not.
We could ask the planning staff to send them a copy of the plans.
Great. Or to ask them directly, can we have a copy of the link to the model so we can look at it?
Okay.
Because they may not care about looking at this site at all or commenting on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that a fair way of handling this, Mr. Braithwaite?
I do believe so. Again, the idea is that we want the public to have full faith and confidence that the deliberations are occurring in front of them and that they have access to all the information.
Okay.
So that's
good.
the only concern.
Thank you.
Okay.
So action to planning staff to contact the Conservancy. Ms. Butler, I'll assume you'll email planning staff and give them the direction.
Absolutely.
All right. Action to you to inform staff. Any other questions for staff before we go on to presentation? We can always ask staff questions later. All right, we'll move on to presentation, over to the project, and you got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What?
Good evening to you all. And I'm Alan Hyatt on behalf of Bemby Beach Partnership LLP. You have seen this project before. There is an application pending right now, but before we submit a formal revision, we want to spend some time with you running through some of the features and some of the issues that I think you've heard in part from Ms. Godinez, who, by the way, I would like to get a copy of that memo if that's possible from Cynthia, and just talk about the evolution of the plan, where we are now, because when you saw it before, actually this started off with 46 units, and we've been going back and forth adjusting the plan. You know, since the last work session, we've spent time working with staff, working on various iterations and trying to come up with something that works. And tonight, we will have our professionals that you're familiar with, Leah Wilson, present from Hammond Wilson, Terry Schumann, Bay Engineering, Shelley Wrench, and Debbie Smith are here from Annapolis Landscape Architects. Also, Theo Rogers, who you met, I think, at the last work session, is here. He's a principal of Bemby Beach Partnership LLP. His company is A&R Development Corporation. Casey Phillips is with him, also in attendance tonight. The application certainly has been pending for a while, and we spent a considerable amount of time since the last work session trying to revise plans and being responsive to the issues that came up. Mr. Waldman mentioned that alleyway on the north. I think when we were last before you, we had contracted to buy the land from Baywoods, and we've since consummated that purchase. It's now owned and part of the project. So there's a backdoor way of getting to these units. That particular alleyway is private. The main road in has always been public. And at the last work session, a variety of issues came up pertaining to stormwater devices and how they work. And we talked about materials on the exterior of the units and how the site functions generally. I think Ms. Godinez referred to that, because there was questions with respect to, will the stormwater increase the volume of the wetlands? I think those wetlands were artificially created from runoff from Chesapeake Harbor going way back. And I can let Mr. Schuman address that. And then, of course, what was of extreme interest then, as it is now, is how the beach would be accessible potentially to the public. And I've spent a lot of time on that one since the last work session. And the primary concern and the primary issue with public access concerns liability. And if you recall, we talked about how difficult it was for a homeowners association to have title to the property and then grant some type of public access easement or grant an easement to a conservation entity. So while this is still a bit of a work in process, my conclusion advising my client here is that I think the property has to be conveyed, actually title transferred to an entity, and I'm not sure which entity it would be. There's a number of 501c3 entities that I think would take title. And I think that the transfer would take place, actual deed transfer, we get the project approved, hopefully, and then we transfer this land to this entity. And then the HOA would reserve in the conveyance the right to create, or there would be covenants that would be created, and the covenants would give the HOA the right to establish things like the hours of operation. For instance, we're thinking it should be accessible during daylight hours only, and the types of uses that we have in mind that would be compatible to the adjacent community would be things like launching kayaks, non-motorized vessels, and it would be somewhat of a passive park, but there would be fishing, crabbing, but no concerts, no actual events, and we have to work on that, and hopefully we'll get to a point where when we make submit the formal revision, we'll spell all this out. But I think that's what's going to have to happen in order for this to work, because I don't believe the HOA can retain title and get any kind of insurance coverage for allowing public access. So, I'm happy to talk about that if you want to talk about that in the beginning. Otherwise, I would have Mr. Rogers say a few words, and then we would turn it over to our professionals to explain the site plan and what's changed since the last time we met, and try to respond to your questions and concerns this evening. So shall I turn it over to Mr. Rogers?
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Mr. Rogers?
Excuse me. Thank you, Alan. My name is Theo Rogers. I'm CEO of A&R Development Corporation. A&R is the managing general partner of the landowners entity. I have been personally involved in the Bimby Beach Cause Beach property for over 40 years. The Bimby Beach parcel was purchased by my late partner, William Adams, in the early 1940s, and this parcel was a part of the well-known Carl's Beach Amusement Complex. In the late 1970s, I was responsible for the sale of a portion of the large tract for development that is now known as Chesapeake Harbor. For the past 15 years, my company has been responsible for getting development approval for the 5 acres being reviewed and discussed tonight. The annexation into the city of Annapolis of this 5 acres from the county was completed in 2005. We have been pursuing planning approval for the past 10 years. Since our last work session held in 2018 that was previously stated, we engaged the Annapolis firm of Hammond Wilson to enhance the project's design, and the team has held numerous meetings with planning and zoning to ensure that our development design is addressing the concerns of the planning and zoning staff. I am now going to introduce Leo Wilson of Hammond Wilson to explain the details of our development proposal. So Leo.
Yeah, thank you. I think the best way to move forward through the rest of the presentation is for me to go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do that right now.
Right ahead. You guys have the floor.
Okay, great. Okay. So is that showing as a full screen feed for you guys?
Yes, it is.
Great. Okay. So as Theo mentioned, we've been at this for some time now. His history on it is much longer than ours, of course, but when we got involved about a year and a half ago, we started to look at what had been presented previously to the Planning Commission and what you looked at for the work session and what was worked through with planning and zoning staff to try and get this thing to move forward. And so once we got involved, we started a series of discussions. We met in January with most of the team that was here tonight, including Matt Waters. In February, we met again. In March, we met again. In July, we came back and had another call, and that brought us here tonight. So we've been underway with revisions to this approach for some time. And the goal here, of course, is to move forward with a project that fulfills the requirements for the city and also provides a project that makes sense for Theo and A&R Development. So there's one other person on the call who I just wanted to make sure got mentioned here. We've been working with Casey Phillips, who's working with A&R, and he's attended most of the meetings we've had with the city so that the owners had consistent direct involvement with the process and has maintained close contact with us and the city to make sure we're moving forward in a way that responds to the comments we've received from planning and zoning staff. So we'll dive right in. The first slide is a picture of the project site, and sometimes it's hard to remember with everything that you guys are doing what's happening here. So this is the parcel in question here. Just below it, you can see Chesapeake Harbor here with the townhouse development that goes around. This is only a portion of it. There's actually a larger piece that goes around the harbor. And then we've got some other more recent development to the north for Baywoods. And then of course, we've got the yacht yards that are across Bemby Beach. And then another real interesting component here is the Maritime Museum Park campus here. And this is an exciting parcel over here too. A lot more activity over here in recent years. We see Capital Sup has been working out of there for a while. They seem to be doing real well. And we're working with the Maritime Museum right now to look at a pavilion element out here to expand their ability to use the property. So it's nice to be across from that because they are providing some nice public access. And the idea here would be that they can provide access along kind of the creek edge, and that we would be able to provide access with open views to the bay with some beach space there, which is a different type of experience, I think, but you know, they're compatible, and I think it would be really nice to have both. So a couple more overhead shots for context here. You can see across Spa Creek to Watergate, you know, everyone has kind of a general idea of what the space looks like, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. And then some shots of the immediate surroundings. So we're not too far from the city's wastewater treatment facility. Of course, we have the area for the park. Across Bemby Beach is Javen Yacht Yard here. So, and there's also Port Annapolis as well. So heavy marina use down here. We all know that. And then here we start to get into the context that's immediate for us. And so again, we can see what the scale of Chesapeake Harbor looks like. You can see back into the harbor and then the additional units cross to the other side. Baywoods, of course, a couple shots of how these buildings look up close. And here's our waterfront. So you can see the views in the summer and the winter. It's really quite pleasant. It's a nice open area, and it provides long views across the bay. You can see the building for Chesapeake Harbor across the grass there. And again, you can see what this looks like in the winter. It's dynamic, it's natural, and it's nice, and it's our intent to protect it. So here's again an overall shot of the site. You can get a closer look at how the proximity of the adjacent developments work. And again, I just wanted to reiterate, this is a process, and unfortunately, we did not see the notes that came from Planning and Zoning to the Planning Commission. We tried to get a meeting before this to review with them what their concerns might have been, but with schedules and COVID, those meetings are very hard to get. So we would sure like to see those comments in addition to whatever we come to tonight to make sure we're responding to what people are concerned about. But just to demonstrate to you that we've been through this, these are the meeting notes for everyone who attended the meeting on the 19th. We document all of the discussions, try and make sure we don't miss anything. We circulate this back through Planning and Zoning staff to make sure what was listed as a concern has been included in the discussion notes. And then Casey went ahead and put together a matrix of all of the concerns, who brought them up, what the discussion was, who has the action item to try and resolve that issue or to at least address it, and then what the status of it is. So we've been tracking this very carefully from our involvement at the beginning to make sure we're responding to these concerns. And our intent is to continue this process after the work session to whittle this down to a point where everyone feels that we've got a winning outcome. So with that, I'm going to turn this over now to Terry Schuman. Terry Schuman has been involved since the beginning. And I'll start with a slide of what the previous application included. And I'm doing that just as a reference point for you so that you can better understand what's changed since the beginning of it. I just want to mention one component here that's important to me. Cynthia had mentioned concerns about the wetlands here. And here in this scheme, you can see there are 4 houses there. On the next slide, Terry will talk about, you'll see that's been, 2 of those have been taken out in order to reduce the impact there. So sorry to take your discussion point there, Terry, but I wanted to make sure that didn't get missed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry, if that's okay. Terry, we got you. I think you might be on mute.
Yes, you can hear me now, right?
Yeah, we got you.
So Terry Schuman, I represent Bay Engineering Inc. And as Leo indicated, I've been on this. I mean, our project number started from 2006. So I've been on it from the beginning. And the slide you have in front of you is our previous submission, October 2018. This was again, our original submittal. I had 42 units as well. And you can see the wetland area. I think that's the key thing in this one, really the layout, and you can see the wetland area, right? And that was the limits of the wetlands and I'll get into this a little bit more. That was the limit of the wetlands from the original surveys and delineations. So what's your next slide, Leo? Yeah, let me just, so again, the acreage, just to regroup a little bit on the background, it's 5.2 acres. It is zoned R3 residential. Along the Chesapeake Harbor side, that's the city-county border. So Chesapeake Harbor is in the county, and this project, as Theo indicated, was annexed back in 2005 into the city. So we're right at the border, and then that border continues down Edgewood Road. We are located within the intensely developed area, so IDA, we're non-buffer exempt, and we are served by public city sewer and water. And access for our site is, we have 2 access points off of Bemby Beach Road, and take Edgewood Road down, it makes a hard left, and that's where Bemby Beach Road begins. And then adjacent to that, as Leo indicated, is the Helen Moyer Park and the Maritime Park. I think, I thought what we'd do, Leo, maybe go to the site plan. Is there, I think yeah, this one. This is what I'd like to do is just kind of go through what has changed since the last work session. So again, we presented back in August of 2018. As I indicated before, I'll start with the mean high water, the environmental issues, and the wetlands. We surveyed this property back in 2006. We started, we survey a mean high water. So that's the tidal area where the water meets the land that defines the property. And then we delineated the wetlands back in 2006 as well. Since that time, and this was brought up as a number of questions in our last hearing, was, has the wetlands changed? Has the mean high water changed? Global warming has. So we went in 2019 after the hearing, after our work session, I'm sorry, and we resurveyed that mean high water, and it did adjust a little bit, inward a little bit, and our new layout reflects the resurveyed mean high water, which did affect the 100-foot buffer. All that was bought into the site. And when I say it changed by a couple feet. But it did change. So we did all that survey. This new layout reflects the updated survey. As in addition, we redelineated the wetlands, and we got the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the MDE out there, and that was redelineated, and it was reapproved in a jurisdictional determination from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in June of 2020. What happened when we did that? And again, since that time, 2006 was our original delineation. The regulations changed in 2012 on what is a wetland. It got a little more restrictive. Certain things created wetlands that didn't create wetlands before 2012. In addition, when we went out there and redelineated the wetlands, it was the wettest 2018 and 2019. I mean, these were the wettest seasons on record. So the combination of the change in the regulations and the combination of the wet area, the wet season, resulted in a little bump out on the wetlands, which I guess, Leo, maybe you can just show. Yeah, really next to it was that was previous wetlands, but next to it, further away from the water, is that little bump out right there. And that became wetlands in the new jurisdictional determination. I heard a couple of questions like, is it getting any, is it going to continue to grow? We do not think so. Our environmental consultant that delineated it wrote a letter, and we provided that to the city, I think over several meetings. But it's again, the regulations had changed. The wet season, the wettest season on record, resulted in this change, but we do not see that it'll be a continuing growing wetland area. And Alan indicated before, yes, this was the dredge site for when they built Chesapeake Harbor, and we believe, and our wetland specialist believes, that these when they dumped all the dredge material out here, it changed the grades of this property and created these. We believe these wetland areas were partly created from those dredge materials. So, it was a kind of a result of what years ago when they let the dredge material be placed on that site. So with those refined environmental constraints, we looked at the layout, and we some of the from the stuff we heard from the last work session, and we started to rethink the layout. There were some concerns about the pump station, and if you recall, the pump station was up. Well, let me just first say, yes, we have three road systems, if you will. We have this, we call them Road A for now until we get further along. Road A is the main road off of Bemby Beach Road. That is a public road. It always has been and continues to be a road that ultimately will be dedicated to the city. The alleys, we call them Alley B, Alley C, and Alley D. Those are private roads. And as Alan indicated previously, part of that Alley B, which is the other access point off of Bemby Beach Road, was purchased. There was a piece of it that was always an easement, but it was purchased by the applicant from Baywoods. So these are the road configurations. Again, the public road being Road A. With the comments that we got back in from the last work session, that the pump station was a concern, how close it was to the units. So we relocated the pump station over there, right at the corner where Alley B meets up with Alley C. This location centrally located the pump station a little better. And again, the pump station is needed because we can't feed this subdivision by gravity. So the pump station will serve this community only, and it will allow for sewage flow to be, gravity over to the pump station, then pump from there to a manhole over in the Back Creek Park. We think this pump station location is a better fit for it. It gives it a little more breathing room and gets a little more separation from the units. So when we moved that pump station over, it kind of opened up that other area to reevaluate it to the east toward the water. And that whole area was rethought and turned and created the units as they are. On top of, with the increase of the wetland areas and what we were able to do is the applicant looked at the unit sizes and we're able to reduce the widths and the lengths of these units. And in doing that, we relayed those things out. And as a result, we have this layout. It moved some things around, gave a little bit more room. One of the concerns we had too, or questions, was just a direct sidewalk from Bemby Beach Road to the water along that public road. Because before, when we came in previously on the work session, we didn't have a sidewalk along the road. So we've added a sidewalk along one side of the road now. Our sidewalk connection previously was through the lot and through the lots and next to the units and kind of a circuitous path down to the water. So with this revisions that we did and what we heard from the last work sessions, we added that sidewalk along the road. We still have the other sidewalk connections through the site, but this gives a more direct path. It connects the park, and as Leo said, you have the cove and the creek over there, and now you got this sort of sidewalk connection all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. Some of the other things we did was there was some concern on the stormwater, and I'll go down to unit 36 and 37. Leo, maybe you could just point to that. It's down, right around that area. Between those units, there's that stormwater management system. There were some concerns last work session about the tightness of it and the narrowness of between the units over there. So what we did was again, with the smaller units and the relayout of this, we were able to increase previously we only had 17 feet between the units. With this revised layout, we've increased that to 37 feet. 37 feet from unit to unit. So that's an increase of 20 feet. We were also, another concern or another comment that was raised was access to the back of the lots. If a homeowner wants to get to his back of his lot, how do they do it? So this increased width over there allowed for us to give we have a raised boardwalk along the lot line there that you can walk to the back, and it kind of cantilevers over the bioretention area. We did that actually between those units, and we also did it in between the other units as well. As I said before, the pump station, we moved that over. And again, previously back when we did the work session originally, we had a 6-foot separation from the pump station lot line to the units. With this movement and realignment of the site, we've increased that 6-foot separation now to 15 foot in response to some of the questions we had. And we think this is a better plan. So it's a 15-foot separation from the lot line of the pump station to the face of the buildings. So we think that's an improvement. Parking was another question that they had, and previously we had 113 parking spaces, and know that the zoning code requirement requires 2.0 per unit, so that would have been 84 units, 84 parking spaces. We had 113, and with this layout, We were able to increase driveway depths and added some sidewalk parallel parking spaces along the public road. So now we've increased our parking to 132 parking spaces from 113 previously. And now we have a parking ratio of 3.1 per unit. So we think that was an improvement over the plan from before. Again, with the reduction in the unit sizes and the widths and the lengths and the revisions that we've made here, we have increased the open space a little bit from our last work session. So we also have an impervious coverage limitation being in the IDA of 50%. And we are meeting that impervious coverage limitation as we did before, and we will with this plan as well. I think, Leo, maybe move on to the next slide. So let's talk about stormwater, because that has been a big thing since our last work session and some of the comments that we heard from the last work session. When we went to the last work session, that was in 2018, the code requirement was 100% requirement for stormwater management. Since that time, the new regulations now have bumped that up to 125%. Our revised plan does meet the 125% requirement for new development. We do that with a series, and this plan represents, there's a lot of numbers and tables, but you can see the leader lines pointing to all the things. So we have many different stormwater management facilities on this site. We do have 2 permeable pavement areas up along that alley B. We have 51 raised rain gardens. So there's some other projects in the city. We've done this before and presented to you guys through some of the planning commission hearings. But so these are rain gardens that raised rain gardens up against the buildings that treat the runoff from the roof and downspouts. So each of these units pretty much have 1 or maybe 2 of these rain gardens on the sides and rears of these units that will filter that water, and then it's kind of a treatment train from there. The rain gardens go into the bioretentions, then go into the submerged gravel wetlands and things like that into the wetland areas. We have 3 Filterra boxes. These are along the public road. These are basically structured concrete vaults with media filter, and the Filterra boxes have the added value of planting a tree in the Filterra box for aesthetics. So we have 2 rain gardens. We have 1 submerged gravel wetland. We have 6 microbio areas and 2 bioretention areas. With all these stormwater management requirements, we do meet the critical area requirements that we have in the IDA, the 10% pollutant reduction. We will meet all those requirements with these stormwater requirements. And then there was some comments previously and about the wetlands, and would we be drying the wetlands out, or would we? So some of the things we've done since the last time and working with the city stormwater engineers, we broke up our outfall. We used to just point it down to 1 outfall point, and we broke it up now into 3 outfall points, which kind of disperses the stormwater out to the wetland areas. And then the wetland areas take it out to the bay. So it helps to mimic the pre-development conditions and spread that water out as opposed to 1 point source. And we do, we will not impact the wetlands any more than what they are impacted today. Part of our stormwater management plan is not increasing the flows to those or decreasing the flows to those wetlands. So again, we're trying to mimic the existing conditions to those wetland areas, and this plan represents that. There was talk, again, we have some alternative paving surfaces, all the driveways. I think previously there was an option to put them as asphalt, but the applicant will put all those driveways as a concrete as opposed to asphalt. And I think, I'm certainly available for questions, but we can keep going. Okay, yeah, the next slide was fire. Well, let me just step back on the stormwater. Since our last work session, again, we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years with many meetings working with the stormwater engineer for the city on this. And he's had a lot of comments. We've addressed those along the way. And these plans reflect what we feel are the responses to the many comments we've received they were kind of informal submittals, and the city was nice enough to review those along the way and guide us along the way. The city engineer also implemented some feedback from MDE on the stormwater. Again, we think we've addressed all those. We've kind of worked with them along the way. I can't say that the stormwater engineer has no more comments because we haven't made a formal submittal, but we believe we've worked along the way and responded to those comments in a positive way that we hope the city engineer can agree to. Let's go to the next slide, Leo. Fire. I just wanted to point out that we also worked very hard with the fire department on this new layout, and this reflects just when we make our formal submittals. This is the kind of feedback we got from the fire marshal. We showed turning templates and how these roads would work with fire trucks and fire safety and vehicle turnarounds. And they have conceptually approved this, again, subject to formal submittals and follow-up reviews. But we did dialogue with the fire department, had several meetings with them, and this is a result. And we believe that they have a plan here that they can approve. Next comment, next slide, Leo. I think it might move on to landscaping, and maybe we'll finish our presentation, then we can ask any other questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. So we're going to move into the landscape component of this thing at this point, and we're going to ask Shelley to talk to us about that for a little bit. So Shelley, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great.
Thank you. This is Shelley Wrench from Annapolis Landscape Architects. And so the plan, as the team has evolved it, working with the city, reflects full integration between the stormwater management and engineering and the landscape architecture, open space planning. The project itself, the name Chesapeake Grove at Bimby Beach, in this case is actually what it is. We've created a focal point for the community, the Grove, in the center, the rectangular space, and it's at Bimby Beach. So we've actually, I only say this because I know an awful lot of developments are named for things that kind of don't make sense, but in this case, we've actually named the place for what it is. The Grove itself is roughly the same size as the park at Acton's Landing. So it's actually a significant public space. What we've done is blended the stormwater management, ground plane, bioretention elements with additional planting that kind of runs through that whole ground plane. And then between protecting some of our key trees in the center and then augmenting that with additional native tree planting, we've created a central focus for the community that happens to be the linchpin between the Chesapeake Bay and Back Creek, which is significant. As we all know, we don't have a lot of connections between the Chesapeake Bay and the creeks that are directly accessible by pedestrians. Another thing that this plan accomplishes is it really embraces the wetlands. Often, in my experience, wetlands tend to be back of house, forgotten, kind of force-fed environmental requirements to projects. In this case, we actually are embracing the wetland with the roadway is, obviously outside of the wetland buffers, but it'll be an element that will be one of the side elements that the community can enjoy. And then we have within the 100-foot buffer, per the requirements of the critical area law, essentially a woodland buffer to the bay. Over time, there will be views through those trees, but it's a very strong environmental piece. So we're really actually proud as a team of how well integrated all of the stormwater management elements that Terry spoke of are integrated with what people will actually see and enjoy as they live in this community. And then next slide, maybe.
Okay, trying to get to it.
it's actually significant that we have the tree preservation area of the Grove in the center of the community. Often what happens with infill development is the tree preservation gets pushed to the perimeter. It's easier to work out the site engineering, but what happens is those beautiful preserved trees tend to be background. In this case, our primary tree preservation zone is really a core kind of organizing the overall community. And I'm going to move pretty quickly because I want to save some time for Leo. There's all kinds of tables. The entire site with a tree survey was actually redone last fall because of the time that had elapsed. Mostly so we had good current numbers, but when everything's said and done, we have an extremely generous complement of trees proposed for the site. Between the preserved trees and trees we're proposing to plant, we have somewhat over 800 trees proposed for the site. So it's definitely going to have a strong woodland character. Let's go to the next slide. So this is basically a graphic that illustrates what Terry was reviewing, all the various different environmental pieces that key into the site. The orange line is the pedestrian connection that runs all the way from Back Creek through the property to the Chesapeake Bay. So that's kind of our connective tissue. And then we have to the lower right, it shows the stormwater planter. So essentially we've got a stormwater planter associated with every building on the site. And then I don't want to repeat what Terry said, but basically the full complement of all of it, it's basically the kit of parts. Essentially, I think almost everything you can do for stormwater management, we have integrated into this site plan. And that might be my last slide, I'm not sure. Oh, and this is basically just another way to key it out, but you can see very clearly on this might be the clearest place to look at the different coding for the different types of ground plane stormwater management, the submerged gravel wetlands, rain gardens, bioretention. It's essentially just another way of showing, actually this one shows very clearly where the permeable paving is up on the alley. The two panels that Terry mentioned. But if you need any specific reference for what types of stormwater elements are located in which places, this might be the clearest reference. And the 100-foot buffer, the plan that was submitted in 2018 was approved by Critical Area Commission. I'm sure it'll probably cycle through to reconfirm that, but essentially we're proposing all native trees according to the requirements of that legislation. And I think that basically summarizes the site. And now really pleased that Leo joined the team and has provided some really refreshing architecture for the project.
Shelley, thanks. Just wanted to run back real quickly to one of the earlier slides before I get into the work that Hammond Wilson has been doing. You start to take a quick look at what we've got here in terms of how the buildings are arranged and the way the green space is working at this point. You know, we really tried hard to integrate more green space through the center of this entire development and, you know, boost that as much as we could. Part of it's driven by the 125% rule, and part of it's driven by the requirements for additional trees. But if you look at this buffer between the Chesapeake Bay and the development area for this project, I mean, it's not often you see this density. I mean, developers are constantly trying to open these views up and reduce this as much as is practical. And I think our landscape team has gone the other way and kind of embraced this thing and pulled this stuff all the way through the center of the site between the residences. You know, it's about as green a site as I've seen developed in Annapolis in some time. I just want to go back to that for a second. Now, as we move into the architecture. So one of the challenges we heard about when they asked us to join the team was that there seemed to be some reluctance on the part of the planning and zoning team to kind of just take without some adjustment the architecture that was proposed. And you know, everyone looks at these things differently, but this is where we started. This is when we came into the project. This is where they were, and we took a look and said, okay, well, that's a starting point. Let's see what else we might be able to come up with. And so as we do on many of our projects, you know, we start to look for what I'll call precedent images or examples of where we feel that projects of this scale, of this, you know, kind of character have been done successfully. And so we start by looking at what do we like? What do we think starts to make some sense? We look at things that use more materials that feel a little bit more coastal, I'll say, or of the Chesapeake Bay. We look at forms that feel a little bit more of a, I'll call it a local vernacular. We look at some of the successful projects we've seen downtown, some other imagery for things that are being developed, you know, not too far from us, and things that might be a little further away that are of interest to us. And so this is where we start. We go through a couple of pages of this type of information and we say, are these images that start to make sense to us? And we go through this with planning and zoning staff too, and we whittle down what we're using as kind of the precedent image to say, these look more appropriate, these look less appropriate. And so we start to look at all of these things. And then one of the things we also look at is, you know, what's down there now? And this is one of the existing residences that was in the area. And we thought, you know, this starts to tell us a little bit of a story here. You know, it's a building with, you know, some character. It's got wraparound porches. It's got a sense of place. And, you know, it starts to tell me, you know, this is not of, you know, somewhere in Williamsburg. This is of the Chesapeake Bay region. And so we start to think about how those things might work. These small porches, for instance, and some detail around the garages and different roof forms that, you know, provide lower pieces and tall pieces. All of this kind of stuff starts to play into how we think about the project. So what we've done is we've looked at ways to kind of make the faces of these buildings interesting. And so you'll see that colors are essentially different types of units, and we've spread them out in ways that make sense from a development pattern, but also we think are interesting in terms of architectural form and character. So you'll see that each one of these elements has an arrow on it. The arrows show where there's outdoor spaces that are going to be covered and developed in a way that mitigate the tall faces of buildings that we see often, with some elements at grade and at the first floor that start to break those up. So where do we end up? Well, these are, again, initial concepts. We've been working on these for a while, but what we did is we tried to move away from this kind of colonial townhouse model that we saw before, where each one was kind of a different color and just had a different, you know, set of shingles, let's say, or you know, roof shingles, siding, that type of thing. And we said, well, let's develop it in a way that has kind of an overriding kind of character to the buildings that's just showing a slight adjustment to each one of the buildings and starts to become a composition as a building itself with things that break down the scale of it as you get closer and closer to it. So for instance, you'll see in this unit here, we've used different roof forms from unit to unit. We've decided to use different window patterns from unit to unit that start to speak to us in a little different way. And then we've added lower level porches. Now, this was a push because these are not cheap to do, but in our opinion, these things are what make this place feel much more livable and much more, I'll call it neighborly. When you think about these types of things adjacent to that green space in the center of the project, you start to feel like, yeah, this is something that really is inviting and feels like a neighborhood, and a sense of place starts to become apparent to you. So what you'll see in these drawings, I'm not going to go through each one of these because I think the intent here is just to get the discussion started, but you'll see a small little red square in the diagram in the corner, and that shows the building that's being drawn on that sheet. I'll spend just a little bit more time here on these end elevations. Rather than look at a blank end elevation that looks like the same townhouse unit repeated with just, you know, fewer windows and the same roof form, we decided to bring these roof forms back with a hip unit with maybe some small gables that peek up through it. And again, the idea is to reduce the sense that this is a row of houses and more a grouping of structures that start to have an end and a middle and a beginning, So the ends are treated in a much different way than the unit directly adjacent to it. Again, this is somewhat of a sacrifice because it changes how the space in the unit works. But I think the more important component is that, you know, they start to feel and look of a character that makes sense to me. So here we go to the second grouping of buildings. And, you know, again, I'm going to go through these very quickly because there's three-dimensional ones that are a little easier to read. Third set of units, these are a little different. These are handled in a different way. The parking arrangements are slightly different. In this case, you come into the front instead of the back. Some of the units on the end have some interesting things happening there, again, with the porch elements. Other units here, as we go down, these are a turn set of units that are running parallel to the waterfront. You know, all of these are just developed a little bit differently. Again, you'll see some pieces where there's covered elements, there's bay windows, little balconies that may show up on some of the units. Pushed out bay windows we thought were interesting. Next building over, very similar to the first one, only just a little different scale. The one that's right behind the 100-foot buffer here, you can see the trees so close to the building. You can see these bay elements start to take on a little different form here. The same set of architectural pieces, just a slightly different way to put them together. Slight changes to how the porches are handled, some interesting things with some siding changes at the top rather than the vertical board and batten assemblies here. We'll have a panel assembly here. Again, pieces we would see in many waterfront communities up and down the East Coast, many of which might be right in the Chesapeake Bay region. We get into the two houses that are adjacent to the wetlands. Now, these are changed quite a bit because these have a slightly different job. I know that there are concerns about sea level and you know, what the floodplain might look like here. And so in this unit, we've reduced to the greatest extent practical the living spaces on the first floor. So this is a situation where we started to look at some more coastal architectural styles for these types of buildings. So we've pushed some of the living space up a floor, and we've developed a lower level as the type of construction that would be able to withstand storm surges and that type of thing without changing, you know, dramatically how much the house would affect the floodplain. So again, we see this on coastal properties. We were asked to look at this from Ryan Blomley at the city when we were looking at doing this development. Also, we took two out just because they no longer fit with how we were trying to make the project work. So finally, we come up the other side. I'll go through these very quickly because I want to get to these. These are the ones that start to show you what it really would feel like in our estimation. Now, I think you all know that as our office goes through this process, we kind of layer on additional information. This is a result of kind of, you know, several months of work, but this is our initial kind of shot at what the architecture looks like. So it's not well developed, but it gives you a sense of where we're headed with it. The green space, this I think is, you know, something I'm pretty proud of. I really like the way these start to say, you know, this isn't just an area to be, you know, forgotten about just because it happens to be green space that the city's requiring us to provide. Here we're taking this area around the entire thing and really activating it with open porches, with walkways, with the breezeways that go through. Keep in mind, these drawings, I don't want you just to look at the trees. So I took a bunch of them out and just left a few in. This is a very green area. So, but if I showed all the trees, it'd be very hard for you to see through it. And some other areas on the property, the arrow down in the lower diagram shows you where we've taken these views from. So this is from the edge of the property looking up through to the main walkway. But again, you'll see interesting spaces over here, like, you know, where these back alley pieces are and what they might look like, what kind of character they might have, what the end units might look like as they relate to the front of the other units. So just developing kind of a more village type feel to this thing. The shot from up above, again, the landscape has been stripped back a little bit. The images are a little grainy, but you can get a sense of what we're thinking about. So these are those kind of rain garden elements between the units. We pulled these apart, as Terry mentioned. There's the meandering walkways through here. There's a mix of, you know, the stormwater and all of those things. And then the pedestrian walkways through this, I think, are a key part to making this thing feel good. Another shot, looking back towards the street through the green space. Another one looking towards the water. So if you were to look way down here and I took everything out, you get a little peek. Of course, I don't think you'll be able to see that by the time we plan it. But you can see the parking that's provided adjacent to this. So for visitors, that type of thing. Another overall shot of the screen. I think it kind of just starts to speak for itself. I started to drop out a little bit so I could show you what the character looks like in conjunction with the scale of the adjacent developments. So here you'll see kind of a rough outline of what we think is happening over on the Baywood side. These are from aerial photographs we took from like Google Maps, that type of thing. We're gonna, in the end, use a photo montage or whatever device we can to set this imagery into the actual context. But that takes a little time. We want to make sure we have the first part right. But this is our best approximation to the scale of the adjacent structures. A couple different dynamic images here showing a little broader view. And then finally, I get up into the ones that are, these we did set into photographs. We didn't spend a lot of time trying to make these look exactly like what we were going to do. We just put the raw 3D model into this. So here's Baywoods. Here's the green space that's left between the buildings. Here's our Grove area. Here's Chesapeake Harbor that kind of winds around, and then the green space that buffers them and us. And then finally, the green space that'll be left along the waterfront. And then another quick view from up above. And again, we're just trying to get it started for the discussion, but my goodness, it seems to me there's an awful lot of green space that's being kind of provided back to the community and to the residents, especially with the connection over to the Maritime Museum down here. And then, with A&R Development's decision to try and work with the city to figure out a way to make this all public access, which is such a hot item for the city right now. I mean, it's really, in my opinion, is almost unprecedented to provide that kind of access through a development project on the waterfront. So we're excited about that. We want to work it out. I know Alan's working hard to figure out how to make that work. I know there are concerns from planning and zoning staff about, things like stormwater and issues like density and that type of thing. But we have to remember that, these projects are always a balance. We've got a balance between a property owner's right to take advantage of the ownership of their property in accordance with, the guidelines provided by the jurisdiction. We all know that. But at the same time, we're trying to balance that right with what's good for the city of Annapolis and what makes this a good development project. And so, we see much higher densities around us. We sure wish that, in some ways we could do that, but times are different. And so now we're at a point where that balance is coming to the point where, it's much more of a hard push for the green stuff. The goal for us is to incorporate that in a way that's healthy and successful, but doesn't strip away the owner's ability to make good use of this property and provide additional housing and, a good project. So I asked the commission to balance those things because I know right now there's a lot of interest on the environmental side and we're sensitive to it, but there's also rights on the development side. And we think, this balance is starting to look like it's making sense to us. So I think that's my last slide. And with that, I'll stop talking. Alan, did I miss anything? I said
I think you got it covered. Can someone tell the commission what percentage of the site is devoted to pervious coverage? Do we have that statistic?
I think you're muted, Terry. Terry, I think you're still muted.
The lot coverage, Alan, is 42.6%.
Okay. Thank you.
The limitation requirement is 50%.
Okay, well, I think that we'll conclude our presentation, and we'd love for the commissioners to inquire with any of us concerning any matters that you'd like to discuss.
Got some questions I'll just go over first, and I'd like to highlight to the public. So if you could bring up a slide that shows, and you can really point out access to the beach, how a public person from outside of that community would access the beach from the main road going to the beach. Could you point that out with your arrow or a nice little hand and show that? Also, go ahead.
I think this is the best one to show it from. So here's Bemby Beach Road, right? And so we've got a crossing over here that takes us along the edge of the property here, past the green space. And then this is a public walkway. Of course, it's over here too, but it goes all the way down, crosses one of the private alleys. Across here, there's a little parking here, and then through the green space in the 100-foot buffer to the beach itself right here. So this is a continuous path all the way from Bemby Beach down to the water.
And then therefore, the neighborhood wouldn't be allowed to lock that off until certain hours of the day. Let's say, I don't know, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something. Would they have a gate in this community? Are they planning that at all?
Well, I think there probably would be a gate at some point to control evening access, but we really, frankly, haven't gotten that far yet. I think the goal was to keep it open at times where it felt safe and comfortable for the public and the residents.
Okay, so if having beach access, it would become the most, for the public, it would be, to the bay, it'd become one of the most popular areas in that in that conglomeration of apartment buildings, it seems, condos, what have you. Also on the north side, the access through that house property that abuts to the north, the house property, you haven't acquired that. That's going to stay a house in that piece of property right there, right?
Yeah, the gentleman who owns that stays, he can maintain ownership. One of the things that I think the team was asked to do is to make sure that he had a connection to the sewer once that was put in place on our project. And so we've made arrangements to do that.
And he's what, not on a septic system right now? Not city?
My understanding is that he is.
He's on well and septic, and we will be providing the ability for him to connect for water and sewer.
That's an improvement. And he's able to get to his house through the access road to the north that you're going to continue to.
Yes.
Do the development, okay?
His driveway access will continue down that alley, as well as there's also some fire access to the Baywoods that goes back there as well. Fire vehicle access.
How would you separate beach access to going onto his beach? Or her beach, whoever owns it?
Well, gosh, I don't know if we thought that through yet. I mean,
Well,
it seems
you
to me
could,
though that.
I mean, if I guess he could put up a fence if he wanted to prevent people from trespassing onto his property.
Okay, so you won't have a fence extending down through the beach, I would presume. You wouldn't want to do that. Okay. Other question I have is, you said you went from driveways being asphalt to concrete, but the majority of roads, Road A, Alley C, and Alley D, not Alley G, are going to be asphalt, right? I'm glad that you got that, Alan.
I got it. I like that. Really.
Need a little comedy in here. So those are going to be asphalt, right?
That's the current plan for right now.
That's the current plan. More asphalt.
Well, remember that those are in accordance with the city specifications for road development. I mean,
They always are. They always are. Because we
in
haven't.
the areas where we have latitude, we've made some changes, but you'd have to talk to Public Works about whether they're willing to accept pervious pavers or anything else like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so access by the public, we've covered that. There was talk of a pier in the past meetings that we've had, work sessions on this, and the goods, pros and cons to that. Could you rehash that real quick? Why a pier is not recommended or is recommended?
We concluded that a pier is likely to create more liability, or the beach with a pier is a whole lot more liability than without. That's really our conclusion.
Okay.
And I don't know how far out you'd have to put a pier for it to be meaningful. I mean, you can't dock any boats right on the bay, so it's as a practical matter, I don't think it does much.
Okay, personally, I wouldn't want to see a pier. I'd want to keep it as natural as possible. Also, if people are going to come in and use this area, what's to stop them from parking in your spare open parking spaces inside of your development?
Well, we've tried to provide additional parking, beyond the code required minimums here. And, we believe that, there's ample space for some visitors to come down here and park on the property if they wanted to.
Would there be a sign like at the other developments where we have around Annapolis where residents parking only or something like that be a restriction in this neighborhood for
I
parking?
imagine we'd have to work that out in the details, but there might be a case where we'd say these are residents and guests only, and then this could be, unlabeled so that people would be able to park there.
I'm assuming some people are going to want to drive kayaks in there and launch them on the beach there. And I get it, it's private property, but yet you might have to title it over the city. It's just a concern, and I'm wondering how you would handle that. So it sounds like it's not totally hashed out yet. That's something that would have to be spelled out specifically later.
Okay.
Adequate public facilities. A lot of these developments that are very dense, and I think this is dense, have a pool on their own land or a tennis court or something else like that. It seems that what you have here is really a couple of walking areas, dog park, and a very nice beach of your own to use for everyone. So that's fantastic. But if someone wanted to play in a field or something around there, what's the closest field you would have for them to go, I don't know, play soccer or kickball, who knows what?
I would think the closest are any ball fields near the schools, and that Peninsula Athletic Park, as you go down toward the Bay Ridge community, there's parks there. I think given the number of units here, there's significant park-like opportunities, but not ball fields. I mean, it's not big enough for ball fields, but there's plenty of ball fields nearby, I think.
Howell Park is real close.
Go ahead.
Howell Park is really close. It's not.
It is, yes.
Right.
About a mile,
I just
about
wanted
a
to,
mile away.
yeah, it's close enough to ride a bike. I have a quick question. This is Diane. I was thinking about the APF also, and Ben just brought it up. So I think in the city, you're required to have 500 square feet per unit. And so there's 42 units. I think that's 21,000 square feet of recreation space. So I know you're allowed to use parks within a half mile, and clearly you've got Ellen Moyer Nature Park right there. So that may be a good portion of what would keep you in compliance with your APF for recreation. Do you know if that is the case?
That is the case,
Okay.
Ms. Beller, yes.
And I have a question. I'm pretty impressed with the way that the trees are laid out. And I was just curious about the Annapolis Tree Code, Chapter 17. Are we using trees in the development area for calculating the trees that need to be placed on site? That's for Shelley, I guess. Sorry,
Yes.
Shelley.
Yes, we're intimately familiar with that code.
So it meets Chapter 17, and that's how you've got to find some space for, what did you say, 386 trees or something?
That's how we did all our calculations.
Okay, great. This goes to, I'm jumping around a little bit. I'm jumping into APF right now. How many MPDUs are here? Since there's 42 units, that would be about, if that's 15%, 6 MPDUs. And where are they?
This project, Ms. Butler, is grandfathered under the old law, and there's an agreement to pay a fee in lieu.
You're kidding. Oh my God. Okay. Is that agreement something that we can see? Is that our private, like, how did that agreement come about?
That was an application that was made to the Department of Planning and Zoning, and there's an agreement that goes back some time ago.
So planning and zoning can override our.
Well, they can't anymore under the current law. This one was a project that came under the old law.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. Also for APF, there's no transit. So would you consider paying into a fund that would provide shuttle down Edgewood Road for, in partnership with the other, well, with the senior centers and Port Annapolis, for instance?
Well, we have to get our APF certification, so I'm not certain about that. I mean, it could involve that. I don't know. I mean, the last traffic impact study required us to do, I think, some improvements to one of the intersections. It wasn't a significant problem. I forget now. Some improvements to, I think, Edgewood and Bay Ridge, and maybe Bay Ridge at Forest.
Mhm.
But that'll have to be vetted, because that whole application process has to be considered.
And jumping to parking for a minute, you've increased the parking from, I guess, what's 113 before and now 132, 3.1 cars or spaces per unit. Actually, we think, I shouldn't say we, I personally think that that's probably more parking than you need. Maybe there's some way to reconsider, maybe decreasing the parking in order to, increase stormwater management. I don't know, was it the city that said you should increase parking? Everyone's talking about trying to reduce the number of cars and get people biking and walking. So I was just curious how that came about.
Well, I think part of the concern was, I think it was brought up earlier in some of the comments before, where do the public come down and park? So we added some parking spaces along the public road. I think some of the spaces are in the a lot of them are in the driveways and the garages. It's just the nature of the size of the units. So we have 18 surface parking spaces for visitors, if you will.
Okay, that and visitors would potentially include the public.
Yes.
Potentially.
I think that's significant and positive. If it's going to be actually some public access, people are going to need a place to park to reach the beach. And Terry, I was interested, you mentioned the 51 raised rain gardens, and I think I know what they look like, but is there a place in Annapolis I can take a look at what that is?
Yeah, we did them. If you're familiar with over by Volvo Subaru off Route 2.
Yep.
So Annapolis Towns at Neal Farm.
Yep.
We did those on those townhome units.
And so what's your experience? Are they really effective, medium effectiveness, or
I think it's a very good way in an area like this where we don't have much, you got water table issues and not the best permeable soils, that you can treat the roof runoff. So yeah, I think what I've been seeing is, yes, it's been pretty effective.
Great.
And I think they can be done nicely and aesthetically looking as well.
Yeah, I see where they are next to the houses, and I think that's great space for them too. On page 9, I was looking at where the permeable pavement is, and I'm just curious, why is it only in the section, it's only part of the private alley. Why couldn't you extend the permeable?
So again, we've been working with the stormwater engineer, and that was the area where we were able to get some permeable. And one of the things we did too is we went back out and did some more geotech borings, pretty extensive geotech borings, made sure we did them during the wet season.
Yep.
And that really is the area that we can get acceptance from the city engineer on permeable pavement.
Okay.
Because of soil characteristics, water table, permeable soils, those type of things.
And so what about, you mentioned that the driveways would be concrete and not asphalt, which I think is great. But couldn't you consider permeable concrete for the driveways?
Yeah, I think that, well, again, I think we're not finding any permeability in that area. And sometimes with the driveways, they're compacted. There's a lot of utilities. That's where the gas, water, sewer is all coming in to each unit.
Got
It's
it.
just it's a very tight place to have successful permeability.
Got it. I was also looking at units number 28 and 29. So those are the two units closest to the wooded buffer area. And, earlier what Leo said was that they reduced the living space on the ground floor, recognizing the climate change issues. And this is in a floodplain area, and the mean low water is, well, you know what it is. They're a problem. So kudos for thinking about moving the living space up. But would you consider reducing the living space altogether? Because that would add some space for additional tree planting, additional buffer. And, I'm looking at the buffers right around the critical area. And I mean, I can't tell because the line is purple, but are you saying there's 25 feet between like unit number 29 and the wetland buffer area?
Yeah,
It looks really close. I'm on page number 9.
well, I think Leo just put up this probably a better shot of it right there.
Uh-huh.
And you can see the,
Going back or forward. No, this one?
no, Leo, I think you had it on that sheet too. I think that's a better plan to look at.
Yeah, that shows it, that sheet too.
This one here?
Yeah, maybe you could just blow that area up, but you could see the answer to your question is yes, we're outside the 25-foot buffer to the delineated wetlands.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It looks like you're right up against it. And as water would rise, it would just flow right into that wetland area. And, just those houses are going to be,
But
in jeopardy.
But also there is going to be a retaining wall. And I failed to say this when I was talking before, but we're not going to, last time we talked, we were doing like a modular block concrete wall.
Yeah.
What we're looking at doing here is a living wall. Filtrex puts out a living wall, and it's just an aesthetically nice looking wall that can serve the structural ability of a normal concrete wall. So yeah, we just think it'll complement well with the environment and the aesthetics of trying to keep a green project there.
So unit 29 will be right up against a wall?
There'll be a wall.
Huh.
Correct.
And how far does that wall go down into the soil?
It pretty much lays right on the soil, maybe a foot or two down. It's sort of a geogrid type wall. So
yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but
the foundation might, that we all have to determine about the foundation and everything else. So
But you have to keep in mind though, that this line that you're seeing that looks so close, that's the wetland buffer line.
Yeah.
This is the wetland line down here.
No.
So the buffer line is drawn heavy only because we want to make sure we stayed out of it, but the wetland doesn't start till this location here.
Right.
So while it looks awful close to where it's delineated, it really doesn't start till over here.
I have another question about public streets. Do you know if Public Works has evaluated if they get inundated by projected sea level rise? Is the city going to be responsible to deal with that cost? And especially also, I guess this pertains to the yards of these units that are closest to the water. How does that work in terms of liability, do you suppose?
Well, can I just add to that? Let me just say that, the end of the road there. So Leo, maybe you could just point to that zone X line and the flood zone line right there. That's a flood zone elevation 5. That's the elevation of the 100-year flood as mapped by FEMA right now. Our end of our road grade is elevation 7. I mean, you're building a house there, the city requires that you're 2 feet above that flood zone. So the roads will all be more than 2 feet above. That's the lowest point on the whole road system right there is going to be elevation 7, which is going to be 2 feet above the current flood. Now, yes, you're right. Global warming and all that's going to change in the future, but we are 2 feet above. That they allow houses, finished floors, and living space to be a minimum of 2 feet above the flood elevation.
Right, and that's probably not sufficient. And many states are starting to say, we're not letting people build on shorelines that, have such situations. It's a huge issue along, obviously, the East Coast right now. But that's good information. I think that's all I had.
I just got two questions to finish up my questions for you guys. The trees that are depicted on the north and south of the property line just outside the border that are shown on the drawings, you're not counting those as your trees, are you? And on the neighboring property, because on many of your drawings, you show them up and you have them colored, you have them noted and numbered. So
We're not this is Shelley Wrench speaking. We're not counting any of the trees off site. Some of them were surveyed, so they ended up on the spreadsheets, but we're not counting any of those.
why did you survey them then and put them on all the drawings? It's a little misleading, I guess. Any idea?
It was actually required by the city.
The city to do that.
Well, they also want to, show how we could possibly impact adjacent trees and things like that. So it's important information to show.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in again. I just had one more question about the beach area and connectivity. I mean, one of the things that would be so great, I was looking at the last page of the, was it the last page? Yeah, the last page of the packet. And you can see, as you look at the land, Chesapeake Harbor on the far left, and then the proposed development, and then Bay Ridge, Bay Village on the right. And did anyone think about maybe the concept of connecting all of this waterfront and trying to work it into, potential future of public access and connectivity?
Well, I'll speak to that. The thing that's interesting about that is we're the ones doing it. We're starting it. So I'm not sure that we're the ones that would be having the discussion. We're saying, look, here it is. You guys can have this. So really, I think the discussion goes back to planning and zoning in this city and, long range planning.
Right.
If they want to do that type of thing, then they're going to have to take the lead and say, hey, Chesapeake Harbor, we would like to walk along this edge here as a public walkway. And it would be, it's not that I'm opposed to the idea. I think it would be beautiful, but there's a lot of pieces in the way of doing that. So
right.
You might have to wait for their next ask to see if you can get it from them.
No, I think that's a point well taken. This is big city it's planning, and it's what we should be thinking about. It's with our, the planning commission is going to try to, work with planning and zoning to make sure that these things are starting. And so, your piece by preserving that area of beach for public access goes a long way towards making the case to the other property owners that this can be done, it should be done. So I would like to thank you for sort of leading the way right here on this project, because it's really important.
Okay, I'll finish my questions unless Diane, you have any more questions you want to ask in the middle of my questions?
That does it for me.
Okay. The walkway for the people to get down to the beach adjoins existing walkways that go around the condos. I would think if I was that last condo owner right there by that walkway, I would rather have the walkway to the beach honestly be where the street ends. I know it's a little bit, you're taking people off the sidewalk, but odds are you wouldn't want people walking with kayaks or anything right next to that person's residence nonstop. It could just be, I would think you'd want that moved a little to the south. Just a comment to think of. Last question I have is drainage from Chesapeake Harbor. Last time we reviewed this a year and change ago, the Chesapeake Harbor community mentioned, I believe, there were some drainage issues from their property over to the non-tidal wetland, and there were some other issues. Can you focus on how you handled those from the Chesapeake Harbor community, or am I out to lunch on my memory?
Me personally, I'm not aware of the drainage problems between the two sites. So.
Okay, on your list, I believe you'll have some issues. They came and talked to us. Does anybody else remember their big issue? I thought it was drainage down into the tidal wetland. If not, we can move on to anybody else who has questions.
I have a few. Do you mind if I ask them?
I'm done, thank you.
Well, actually, I want to start with a little bit of congratulations. to Mr. Rogers for allowing the vision and this team to work together to create something which is quite modern. Chesapeake Harbor would not be built today the way was built in the 80s. It's a monstrosity. Bay Woods probably wouldn't be built the way it was today. All of this would be quite different, and they would most likely replicate aspects of what you've presented here. So I really want to congratulate folks for really thinking through so many of these issues and for engaging in informal discussions with other city departments and so forth. I think that it really helps to present to us and will help to present to us, a finished project and not one with a whole lot of loose ends, major loose ends. It's a beautiful piece. I wish that the city had the money to buy it for a park, and it would really become that connection that Leo talked about from one piece of water to the other, and would be an amazing place for everybody. But the city doesn't have the money, and it's in the hands of somebody else, and originally came through Mr. Rogers and Mr. Willie Adams. And someday when maybe I sit down with Mr. Rogers and this is all over, I'll tell him a story about what I know about the past in this property and Mr. Adams and Chesapeake Harbor. But that's for a different time and place. The questions I would like to begin with have to do with water once again. We may have had major storms and major wet years in 17 and 18 or 18 and 19. But we're going to see nothing but more of those years over and over again. So water becomes a big issue, and you're so close to the water, and that this property acts as a major filter for water that goes into the bay. So we need to be, as you have been, quite careful, but we may need to be more careful. What I would, Leo, if you could put up something that would sort of give us a show of where the water flow is. Where does the water flow now in its natural state, and what would be the directions to flow? There. That's good.
Sorry, it goes fast. It starts
that was Ms. Wrench's favorite slide, and I think that she's right. Something like that. What you've got are lots of little rain items, these boxes and little things around the houses, and then some things between the sticks of homes. What I want to know is where, if you start from the north side, where does the water flow? Does it flow to the south? Grove, the central grove, is it lower than, say, the street that's on the northern boundary?
Terry, do you want me to go to another slide that shows the existing topo?
Sure, and whatever you think would make the most visual sense.
It might be easiest to look at it from even the existing.
Sheet 5, but I don't know if it's not the greatest. Sheet 5, you were on it just before.
No, back.
This one here, Terry?
Yeah, but it doesn't really show the contours, but to answer your question, pretty much everything is going towards these wetland areas. So
which wetland areas?
Exactly the way Leo's putting that mouse.
Okay, everything flows in that direction?
Everything's flowing at an angle. Like you pointed to, that's the top right there at Bemby Beach, where the north arrow is right there. That's pretty much everything from there is just flowing toward that wetland area.
So that wetland area probably fills up, dries out, and heavy times it gets bigger?
During heavy times, it does fill up with water, yes.
Right, so you have to have a retaining wall to protect the homes and the street?
No, we treat it in all those other devices before it gets there, so.
But it gets there.
It does get there ultimately.
Okay, and your internal drainage system all feeds it into that main wetlands area, right?
It does, yes.
Okay, and why is there a retaining wall?
Because we're raising that site up a little bit right there where the road is. And so,
Okay,
I just want to explain one part about that, and I need to go to a different slide. It's not a retaining wall, it's a planted edge to this thing. So I think it shows on one of the slides that you had for us, Shelley. Is that right?
I have no idea what you're.
I don't think we added the image, but a living wall is essentially an armored slope. It's similar to the technology that's often used for erosion control, where soils are pumped into filter fabric tubes that are then tied back into the slope and stacked up. I think it's only about 4 feet high, 4 or 5 feet high at the highest points. And then native plants are planted into those filter fabric tubes that have good, fluffy, nice soil in it. So ultimately, the plant roots are what holds the armored slope. So a retaining wall kind of sounds scary. Really what we're talking about is a planted armored slope.
Yeah, so there's the only structure to these things are they look like straw tubes, if you will. And so these are staked into place on an angle and they can be planted in their entirety. And then over time, they become a complete green sloped wall. And so we can include that in the next meeting so that you'll have a better sense of it. But, it's really quite remarkable. It's called, it's a retaining component, sure, because it changes from a high to a low grade, but it's a natural way to do it. There's not like a brick wall or concrete or those, blocks that are timber set on an angle. There's none of that. It's a landscape edge.
Even next to the two units, 28 and 29?
That's right. That's right.
Even there?
Yeah, that edge continues through here too. There's no retaining wall in the proper term, or in the formal sense of a retaining wall. These are planted edges here.
Well, that's interesting. Is that what Mr. Schuman talked about, Filtrex?
Filtrex is the primary manufacturer that promotes it, but there's all kinds of information showing roads built close adjacent to living walls, and it's something that we're seeing in many projects now under construction. So it's definitely a green technology that's found its time. We started doing them in 2004 to restore some undercut cliff conditions on the bay, and now I'm starting to see it on commercial projects and different public projects, private projects. So it's basically.
Are they less expensive than hard block retaining walls?
They're $35 to $50 a face foot by the time they're done. So I think they're a little bit less expensive, but by the time you do all the planting and everything, I think they're in the same league.
All right. But so the water starts at that northwest corner and then moves southeast. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So what you have is movement of water through the grove and then to that one pond, which is at the eastern end of the grove. Is that right? Yeah, right there.
Well,
right?
But not all of the water's going to there. So
where's it going then?
There's another pond right here.
Another pond.
And when it overflows, where does it go?
Then we have a main trunk line that's in the road, and the main trunk line will bring the water down to the outfall.
Okay, and the same thing with respect to the facility. I don't know what it is at the eastern end of the grove, behind the two. Right, is that the same sort of? What is that? Is that what you call the gravel based?
No, that's a bioretention area. It's a.
Okay, and is it hard plumbed from there down into the wetland, or is it meant to absorb things as it is?
Oh, it's meant whatever can get into the ground can get into the ground.
But when it overflows, where does it go?
if it overflows, it's hard plumbed with a storm drain pipe down to an outfall right there where the mouse is.
Okay, well, it performs some function of mitigating the flow, absorbing water, and hopefully filtering it through the soil.
Correct.
So that becomes a very important piece, in the very heart of of the whole development.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, here's my thought just off the top of my head, and I certainly am not capable of doing stormwater calculations. But what strikes me is that is a very important piece. It's the heart of the whole community. And that those 2 units there are, I can't say they're superfluous. Certainly, if I were in Mr. Rogers' shoes, I wouldn't say they're superfluous. But I would say that they're in the way, and that stormwater facility really needs to be expanded. Those 2 units, if there were 2 units to go, those are the 2 units to go. And aesthetically, I don't know if I can pronounce this, or is that they visually really block things, and they are. From all of the perspectives and the renderings and so forth that Mr. Wilson showed, those 2 really stick out and are in the way. And so if there were those 2, I think are the 2 units that I think really should be thought of as removable. And then you don't have to go through all those, Leo. Go back to where we were. We want to see the site plans.
Okay. Sorry.
I know you like to see architecture, but we're still on dirt and water. Here, that's good. Anyway, so it's those 2, and also they're next to this pumping station, and there's not a lot of room there between them and the pumping station. And there's not a lot of room, by the way, between the pumping station and the stick of 1, 2, 3, 6, or 7 that are on the northern boundary there. And so that's a really tight little area right there. Right there is very tight. And it's also tight on those 2. And on the other side of the 2, on the street side, there on your public road side, it's also extremely tight. I think those 2 units should be removed. And then if I were to make another change, I would look at the 1, 2, 3, 4 that are facing the bay down at the end. And what I might suggest there is that also, if you remove the furthest south one, that you would, many of the remaining units in the other 2 sticks would then begin to have views of the bay, and perhaps could be expanded in their floor footprints and be sold at higher prices. And you could take the remaining 3 and take maybe half of the footprint of the 4th at the bottom and expand them a little bit and sell them for higher prices, and yet have a real view to the bay, which is not blocked by that last unit there. Okay, right, which is also going to be pressed, as I think Mr. Sale pointed out, it's going to be pressed by the public access and public movement through there. And so the more you can remove that and separate that from the public movement, I think the better. But if you could expand the footprints of the 3 northern ones to maybe half of the, take half of the footprint of this most southern one and distribute it across the 3 others, you might end up with more luxurious and higher priced sale units.
And Bob, that's a great idea for another reason, because if there are people that are going to be unloading their kayaks or stand-up paddle boards, having a little more space there so that they're not pulling into the driveways of unit 28 and 29, for instance, would be a good thing. They could literally go in, drop their kayak off or whatever, and then, hop in their car and drive over and park in the Ellen Moyer Nature Park. So I see some benefit there as well.
Yeah, those 3 units are the only 3 that I have real concerns about. And I think that Ms. Butler also pointed out a very interesting thing as we talk about and try to work through the public access issues. And, this is not a park. We're talking about access, but we're not talking about a park. I'm quite mindful of that. And I think that as the language gets worked out, I think that that's the balance we want to try to reach. The parking, really, there is a lot of parking right across the road in the Ellen Moyer Nature Park. It's that circular, right, it's in there. And it's not, I mean, you drive in, you drop your boat off, and then, you drive out and park, and then you walk back in. I mean, if people are going to use it, I think they're going to have to work at it. That's a different issue.
And there is what about the limits of, I mean, you've given them a beach already. Do you want to make it a beach just for pedestrian access, or do we really want to make this where people can go drop kayaks off and go to it? I mean, I would think if I was in this neighborhood, I would allow it for people to walk to the beach, but having people come in and drop kayaks off, because I mean, it's really going to be the only public accessible beach for that. You might really start having a lot more people coming in, unloading and kind of causing the community.
Well, I think it needs to be thought through. There can be limits. I mean, I don't know how you enforce it. I can just imagine the HOA scratching their heads, and having problems and, getting people off the beach at sundown. And I mean, I can understand from Mr. Hyatt's point of view that there can be some issues coming on. And you're right, this may be just a passive recreation area, which would be fine.
But I think the fact that you're dropping off a kayak and then you're walking all the way back to Moyer Park, and then you have to walk back out, that's gonna deter a lot of people.
Yeah, they're gonna want to. Yeah, that's true. Okay,
It definitely will.
You're going to want to use the public parking spaces, and I can just imagine that. So I think that needs to be thought. There are only 2 or 3, as I recall, in that stretch where the pointer is.
There's some here too.
Yeah. Well, if you get rid of those 2, it's all parkland, and perhaps you can get rid of those 2 spaces, because by reducing the number of units, you're reducing your parking demand. So you might be able to get rid of your 2 on street, or I can't remember how many spaces there are there, but you could get rid of them perhaps. You do want to think about people and their visitors. I get that. Those I think are kind of maybe the most important comments that I have to make. I'm very concerned about the effects of the stormwater flow and what those 2 units do to, and how much better it could be if the units were removed. And then I'm just making a suggestion as to the ones closer to the beach. I question whether the MPDU requirement is actually met by such a major change to site design from the original application. That's not a determination that I have to make, but I question whether MPDU, some requirement may not have to be met here, and that maybe it might be a good idea to meet it. So I am both very encouraged by this, and also I'm a little scared. It is, as was pointed out, tight development. It's a lot of development. It's a better design, a better site design than before. I definitely feel that way. But remember, you're putting almost 50% impervious surfaces on something which is completely natural at this point. And so we need to be very careful about where all that water goes, and it's all headed towards that wetland. In terms of architecture, now architecture is, is maybe ultimately an aesthetic proposition, or it's as much as an aesthetic proposition as a utilitarian one. But in many of the examples of inspiration that Mr. Wilson looked at, there were many that were very, very attractive. And what occurs to me is that by settling on one style throughout this entire community, that what you're making, you're coming very close to the blandness that was the real problem with the previous submission. And variety is the spice of life. Variety is really something that we look forward. And so I'm questioning, and I don't really need an answer, but I'm just maybe throwing out the proposition that the architecture may change according to the sizes of the units or where they are. So that the units on the north side, for instance, are different than the units on the south side. They have a different look, they have a different feel. Some are more modern, some are not. The units that are off of I don't know how to describe the ones further to the east, the 3 sticks to the east, they may be quite different. They may be more traditional. They may be, they may be larger. Those in there may be of a different style. And there may be, of course, elements that tie together, that tie the whole thing together so that you feel that it's a community with some identity. But also, coming back, it's like, why have everything looked the same? Why not, I live on the south side. I live in the row that's got bigger windows. I live in the part that's more traditional. I live in the part that's got, second floor porches or whatever. I'm just tossing that out as just a proposition. It's probably cheaper to build if you have all the same stuff, but you're building so many units, you could change the styles. That's just not something that requires an answer now. Most of these units, if not all of them, are 2-car garage units. Is that correct?
That's correct.
2-car garage units. So the aprons can handle 2 cars, and that's where you're getting all your parking? Yeah.
Well, it depends on the unit, but that's basically the sense, yeah.
Some of them are single loaded?
No, most of them are double loaded.
But
Some
the
of the
aprons
driveways aren't deep enough to carry cars. They're not.
They're not. They are not deep enough?
No. So along the alleys, along the alley B, for instance, those are
Put them inside.
those are close up against the road where you're not going to get parking in the driveway.
Right, and these you would.
Okay, so wait a minute, let's stay with the northern ones. Let's just take a look. And so on the other side of the roadway it's all parallel parking all along the northern boundary?
Correct.
But you don't have enough parking along the northern boundary for 2 cars for every unit, do you?
No, there's parking in these buildings here. It's just there's not an apron in front of the parking.
Okay. All right. So you're assuming people will use their garages for cars and not for storage?
Yeah, kind of like this picture shows. There's driveway and then there's parking right up against the drive. So
Kind of like Acton's Landing, right? Kind of like Acton's Landing, isn't a lot of that stuff real tight?
Yeah, yes, very similar in terms of the approach.
Okay. But the aprons, some of the aprons and the other sticks closer to the bay, the water, some of those are bigger?
Yes.
Okay. And there's no parallel parking close by?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I think these folks will figure it out.
You said you were counting the garage spaces on this alley B? You were counting those garage spaces everywhere in your 134?
Yeah, the garage spaces count to meet the parking requirement, absolutely.
So, okay, you might actually have a parking issue at some points,
Well, if people use their garages for storage, you will.
Which they always do.
Well, then they'll figure it out. That's what HOAs are for.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to also another note of congratulation and gratitude is I noticed on Ms. Wrench's drawings that you're removing Bartlett pear whips. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Rogers, thank you. This is something that really needs to get done, and I think you'll end up in 10 years with a much better place than with all those little nasty things. Well, those are my comments. I am very concerned about the 2 units next to the pumping station and encroaching in on the Central Grove. And I do think that there's some ways of dealing with reducing the bayfront stick by 1, but increasing the size of the remaining 3. Those are the, and I really question 28 and 29. I understand they're quite valuable to Mr. Rogers. I think that they're very vulnerable. From what I gleaned from what Mr. Schuman said is that somehow there's 7 feet between mean high tide and the grade at which those homes are built. Is that correct? 7 feet?
No, what I was saying is the flood zone in that area is elevation 5.
So that's 5 feet above mean high tide?
5 feet above mean high water. But the finished floors, where Leo said they were going to raise the finished floors, will be at elevation approximately 9. So you're about 4 feet above. You're about 4 feet above the flood as far as living space goes.
Okay. Well, I'm not so concerned. I'm concerned about, like a hurricane storm surge that could come through there, but you're going to get a bunch of houses wiped out or made very wet and moldy if that happens. I mean, 9 feet is like, not a whole lot these days. I can't tell you. And those 2 are very vulnerable. I'm surprised that you got approval for them. Those are my concerns. I look forward to hearing something more about the green retaining structures to see what that might look like. And because if they were hard retaining walls, I'd have some real problems with the way the wetlands are being handled. And my impression is that, yeah, there may not be water in there sometimes, and yeah, there's more water other times, but there are going to be times when there's a lot of water in those wetlands because it's now going to take all of the discharge from 50% impervious surfaces. So you need to be really careful with that.
And Bob, I would add that I don't think anything was approved. So when you were just talking about units 28, 29 as being vulnerable, my understanding is that nothing's been approved. This is just, a work session with their plans.
Oh, nothing's been approved. I'm just,
Right.
I mean, there's been no vote, but I'm surprised that, I don't know, what coastal.
I was just clarifying. Thank you.
And so forth. No,
I guess what we're saying is that these comply with construction guidelines as, established by code. This is in fact a buildable area. Now, that's just from a ability to put structure there legally. That's
right.
A permissible build.
Yeah, I get it.
All the other pieces
you mean you're playing close. You're playing close to the line, but
it may be legal, but it may not be smart, is what we're getting at.
So I'm ready with a few comments.
Yes.
I don't want to rehash anything that anybody else has already said, but I just do want to say that the layout, this current layout and the architecture are vastly improved from the last thing that we saw. And so that, I wanted to reiterate that also. And I agree with Bob's comment about varying the architectural styles. I think that's really important. So it just doesn't look so generic. I really like that idea of having neighborhoods within a neighborhood kind of idea. And even more so than I've looked at this, Leo, and I get what you're doing here, but it's still all sort of, while some of the shapes are a little bit different, the vernacular is all the same, if you will, to use your term.
No, your point's well taken, Alex, and I appreciate the comment. I think that's the kind of input I'm looking for. We come at this as kind of, oh, here's one way to handle it, and so that's something that I'm happy to go back and look at again and say maybe this as an architectural style is slightly different from this. I'm not trying to make it impossible for A&R to be successful from a financial standpoint with a development project, but I think those kind of nuances could change the character of the place. So I'm happy to look at that.
Yeah, take that feedback and go cogitate on it. But I am going to differ with Bob a bit on those 2 units that he said should go, which are units, yeah, whatever. I don't know, can't read the numbers on those.
13 and 14.
28, 29.
13 and 14. I sort of take the opposite view. I think they provide, personally, I think they provide a better sense of enclosure in the park. And so I think it makes the park a little bit more, it bounds it. So it's not so much an open space. You know, people like edge conditions. And I think I like, you know, the proximity of the pumping station aside, I think having those end units at the end of the park is actually a positive. And, you know, maybe we'll have to just agree to disagree on that. But one of the other things that it was touched on a little bit are units 28 and 29. So while I think the layout is really, really good, it continues to really bother me that 28 and 29, as in the previous designs, are just sort of stuck in there. And I get why, you know, I get why they're there. They're probably valuable because they're standalone, they're close to the water and all that. So I understand the value of them, but it just, to me, is, as it was in previous designs, it's really incongruous. And from a layout standpoint, but I think when we're talking about the stormwater issues, you know, I think that little peninsula, if you will, is going to end up being problematic from a stormwater management area, because I think eventually that wetland is going to be a saltwater pond, is where I see that in, you know, 10 or 15 years. So I think that's you know, that little peninsula is going to be problematic. But also what does concern me about the units right up against the forest conservation areas, you're going to plant that, and then everybody's going to go away, and that stuff's going to really start to grow. And then the people whose views start to go away, and I've seen this in West Annapolis all the time, people get out their little saws and they start sawing away at stuff because they want their water views. And you know, that, let's not kid ourselves, that's going to happen. And I think, you know, with the 4 units to the north, you know, those are fine. But I think with units 28 and 29, you put a lot of that forest conservation area in jeopardy, because people who live there are going to want the water views. And as that forest conservation area starts to grow and obstruct those views, you know, people are going to start sawing away at that, and you know that's going to happen. So that's another concern of this sort of incongruity of those 2 units. So, you know, my feeling is if 2 units had to go, it would be those 2. And you know, I wouldn't even be averse to having more units other places and not there. I just think it's just that location is just really problematic for all the reasons we've talked about. So that's my feedback. I don't know where other people coming down on that. And I'm not a stormwater engineer, but it just seems that you know, as we have bigger events, as that starts to fill up, then, you know, maybe those living areas or living walls don't do enough, and then that homeowner is going to want to put in a retaining wall as it starts to become problematic. So I just think over time that's going to be an issue. So I'll stop there.
Gotcha.
I second those, and I also second his comment that neighborhoods within neighborhood, in terms of the styles, is really a very potent comment. Neighborhoods within.
I think it was actually yours.
Styles. But anyway,
I think it was your comment, wasn't it?
We've said enough. We've made our points.
Yep.
Good. Dave?
Thank you, guys. This was a really well done presentation, and
Dave,
thank you. We'll go back and consider all your comments and be following back up with you, hopefully within
can I just ask a
2 years.
Can I ask a question before we wrap?
Has David had a chance to talk? Dave?
So
What?
I
Wait a
was
minute,
wondering if
what?
Dave had a chance to talk. I don't think he had anything.
No, I haven't had a chance to talk yet, but that's fine. I just wanted to say that I really agree with a lot of what you guys have been saying, especially with regards to 28 and 29, more than the other two units. I think that really having some variety in the architecture is going to make a big difference. I think about what you did, Leo, which I really liked in Eastport by the boatyard and down in that area, but it looks like one big behemoth. And to a lesser extent, it's the same sort of thing on Annapolis Street. I just don't want to see one big building that's kind of divided into, there needs to be some variety within the buildings when you have these things. So I would like to see that. I'd like to see what happens with the water access. I like the idea of not having the pier now for a lot of reasons. Of course, liability is one of them. You're going to have a lot of fishermen on that pier. It's going to be a real problem with parking if you had that pier there. So I kind of like the idea of not having that there. I think that issues with regards to stand-up paddleboarders or kayakers are not going to be a big issue because I think just the fact that they have to park all the way at Ellen Moyer Park is going to be a deterrent for a lot of people. There will be some people that will walk down and walk back, but it's not going to be a lot. So I don't think that's a huge issue, and it's something that can be remedied later. But I really like to see where things are going with this. I think it looks much better than it was. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you didn't get not given a chance. So, before we close out with this, does anybody else have any comments with regard to Alex and Dave's comments? I've got a quick one or two. Anyone else?
Good.
All right, Bob brought up the parking about the aprons, and even if everybody took away one spot in their unit, Bob, I think you're down from 134 down to 90, which is still 2 per unit. So I don't really think the parking might be that big of an issue, and you didn't make it sound like it was either. The fact of the architecture differences and maybe breaking up the buildings a little bit. Yeah, the architecture difference, 100% agree with. That was a great idea by you guys, instead of having the same thing all the way around. And the last 2 units, I also want to throw my support. And 28, 29 is, I could see that go just like Bob's saying, and also 27 possibly. But one last comment I have is, yet another property where we're throwing 40 plus condos on a 5-acre lot. But I got to give it to you. You're giving public access to the only Bay Beach right there anywhere around. So I give you numerous credit for that, mucho credit. And now, Bob, back to you. You had some closing comments, sir.
No, I've said all I want to say, and I've said too much.
No, I think it was good. Anybody else? It's 10:10, 10:11. Okay, over to the developer for last comments.
Nope.
So just from my side, before Alan starts, I just wanted to say, this is how I think a work session is supposed to work. We're supposed to show you what we're trying to do, and you're supposed to provide commentary that starts to prompt thought before we come in for the final application. And so you've given us great stuff to think about, and I feel like the feedback's really been well considered and is useful. So thank you for that, and we'll come back as soon as we can.
And one other thing, signage, because nobody will know it's a public beach unless there's mandatory signage put in this project somewhere to say that there's public access. It's not a public beach, but it's public access to a private beach. So there's got to be something that tells them out of the street. Something put in here.
We'll include that. We'll include that in that.
That's all I have. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Sale. We appreciate the time. Thank you for your ideas. We're going to go discuss amongst ourselves, and we will be back.
All right, Mr. Hyatt, thank you very much. Leo, the gang. All right, commissioners, anything else you want to talk about? Bob, Vice Chair? Okay, on to the rest of the commissioners.
Ben, I have something.
Director Sally Nash.
Yes, I just wanted to mention we are starting a task force that Alderman Arnett's introducing some legislation for the Maritime Task Force to look at the maritime zoning and how it might need to change. I think we're planning to come to the Planning Commission for work sessions to discuss the progress of the task force. But let me know if you have any input on that. The resolution hasn't passed city council yet, but we'll be coming to work sessions later on that. And I also sent a couple weeks ago an email forwarded from Melissa Maddox Evans proposing a few dates for a consultant to meet with you about the Choice Home Program. They were during the day. I didn't hear back from many of you, so I wasn't sure if that was because it was weird meeting times or if you didn't know what it was. It was picking up from a conversation from her presentation. So I will send that again, but just if you could look for it and respond to me.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry we didn't get that earlier on the miscellany. If you can forward.
Yeah,
that.
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either.
Okay.
Sally, if you're a Doodle fan, I don't know if other people are, but I am. That's a nice, easy way for everybody to stay out of email hell and indicate times that they can attend.
I do often use Doodle, but she sent these dates and times, so I just forwarded her email. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just thought I forwarded it, but I will forward.
You did, but it's kind of trapped down in there, and you know.
I also just wanted to mention that we had our first meeting for the recreation APF review, and Diane was there. It went really well, and there'll be another one on the 2nd. Think, and so if you're interested in attending those, just send me an email. I think I added Alex to that as well. So we're looking at Title 22 chapter by chapter, starting with recreation facilities.
Good, good.
All right, we'll meet on that. And want to thank Mr. Rogers for bringing the project here tonight. Thank you very much, because it stems from you. And if you could stay on after the meeting, got a quick historical question to ask you. If you could stay on.
I will. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything before we close the meeting out? Okay, or actually we are closing out the work session. So work session is now adjourned, and you can take us off of live YouTube.